Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoyed this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Selina lived in a small village and was raised by her mother and father. She had always watched how a woman cared for a man, how she supported him when he was not well. The girl always knew that she too would have a big family. She would get married, have children. Her husband would build her a house, and they will be very happy there. "Selina, what are you thinking about again?" her mother told her. "I was thinking how lucky you and Daddy are." She looked at the woman with her clear blue eyes. "Yes, I am very lucky to have your father." Her mother came up to her and hugged her. The woman had always wanted to have a big family, to have many children, but God didn't give her that. After she gave birth to Selina, she got sick and never got pregnant again. "Here I am," my father came into the house. "Daddy." The girl ran to him. The whole family gathered around the table. It was their tradition. There they talked, told each other about what had happened during the day. "Mom, tell me, how do you choose someone who will love you and always support you?" Selina asked and turned to her mother. At that moment, the girl was 12 years old. "You know, daughter, when you meet him, your heart will tell you that he is the one." Her mother sighed and moved closer to her father. "I want so much to meet someone like you, Dad," Selina confessed to him. "You will, at your age," the father grinned. The daughter only smiled back. She trusted her parents. She went to school. Every day they went there with the guys. Afterwards, if it was warm outside, they would go for a walk, always inventing something. In the winter, they'd ride their briefcases down the hill. It was fun. When Selina was 15 years old, she decided that she had a year left before graduation. She had to think about where she would go. "Would you go to the city?" her mother asked her. Even if I go, then I will go back," told her daughter. "Come back, there is a lot of work here. People need bread," her father told her. Selina planned to become a bookkeeper or a cashier. She was very attracted to numbers, and she knew how to handle them. But fate turned a little differently. When the girl was in the 10th grade, she met, as it seemed to her, the very person who would be with her always as she dreamed. That day, she was leaving school, tripped on the wooden porch, and flew forward. If she had fallen, her knees and elbows would have definitely had to heal. But she was picked up by someone's strong arms. She turned around, her heart pounding frantically in her chest, and the guy was looking at her and smiling. Her long braids reached almost to the ground as she hung in his arms. "Thank you so much," she said and blushed. "Can you imagine what would have happened to you if you'd fallen?" He looked at the ground near the porch. There was a lot of rubble. "Yes, when I stumbled I had already imagined what would happen and how my mother would scold me." Now they were both laughing. Selina was on her feet, adjusting her uniform. "Are you going home?" the young man asked her. "Yes," she said, and walked down the road. "Wait, I'll walk you out." He caught up with her in 2 steps. "Where are you from here? I've never seen you before." The girl asked him. "My parents recently moved here. I was in the army, so I came here. I didn't want to leave them alone. I need to help with the house and garden," he said. "Oh, so your parents are our new neighbors?" she guessed. "About a year ago, a family moved in, a family Selina's mother was very good friends with." "I guess, and you're Selina?" he asked her. "Yes," she laughed in response. "And my name is Harvey." At first he wanted to extend his hand to her, but then he thought it would be awkward, since only men do that. They walked further to their houses, which did stand in the neighborhood. Harvey promised that they would come to visit them in the evening. "I have to ask my parents," she said. "What to ask?" "We will visit you in the neighborhood. They often come to us." He was surprised. "Okay, come on, see you later." She waved at him and went into the gate. Her face was burning, Her heart was beating fast, and her mother noticed at once that something was wrong with her daughter. "Selina, what happened to you? Why are you like this?" she asked her from the doorstep. "Mom, I met him today," she told her. "Who him?" The woman didn't understand. "Well, the one. Remember you told me that when I met him, I would feel it in my heart. And so today, when I almost fell, he caught me," said the daughter confusedly. "I don't understand anything. Sit down at the table, have lunch, then you will tell everything in order," showed her mother that everything is already ready. Selina ate. She went to her room. For some reason she wanted to write a poem. The girl sat down at her desk, wrote the first 2 lines, and then nothing else came into her head. In the evening, as promised, Harvey and his parents came. The woman was glad to see them. She let them in, and they sat down at the table. Colin's mother had baked a very tasty potato pie, and everyone ate it with tea. And then the guy suggested to the girl to go outside and take a little walk. That evening they walked around the village, talking about everything for a long time. "Harvey, didn't you notice that when you caught me, it was like a spark between us?" Selina said to him, though she was ashamed of these words. "You wouldn't believe it. I was far away from that place, but it was like I felt something and I was drawn there." They stopped. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked him hopefully. "Will we be friends?" It was obvious that the guy was also embarrassed. After these words, Selina was not so much shy of the young man anymore. He walked her to the gate, where his parents were just coming out. They all said their goodbyes and went home. "Mom, did you see him?" Selina said to the woman. "Yes, of course I did, and I saw the way you look at him, and how his eyes shine." She kissed her on the top of her head. Selina continued to study. Harvey met her every day after school, walked her home. In the evening, they would walk and talk about the future. "I was going to go to the city after school," she told him. "What's there to do in the city?" The guy didn't understand. "I don't know. Everyone wants to go there. And I also wanted to, of course. Then I promised my mom to come back." For some reason now she was ashamed of these words. "I won't change your mind. If you want to go, I'll follow you. But I think there'll be plenty of work here." He pointed to the office. "I know that without you," Selina thought. When she was home in the evening, she asked her mother if she could talk to Aunt Betty, who worked at the village hall. Maybe she could get her a job somewhere. Her mother, of course, promised that she would do it, but first she had to wait until the educational process was over. Before the exams, the girl was very worried, but Harvey was always there for her. He studied together with her, in some things prompted, where he helped. Selina already knew everything, and when everything happened, she was not even worried. "You're going to be my wife," Harvey whispered discreetly in her ear at graduation. Selina's cheeks flared. She turned sharply toward him. "What are you talking about?" she also whispered quietly. "Why, we're adults. Why not register our relationship?" He was amazed that she didn't want to do that. "But you have to wait a little bit, because I'm not old enough yet," she told him. "I'm ready to wait for you for the rest of my life," he hugged her. After high school, Selina started working part-time at the post office. She enjoyed sorting through newspapers and magazines and delivering letters to the locals. She was on good terms with everyone. She was not rude to anyone. She smiled. Harvey was glad his girlfriend was like that. When she turned 18, she and Harvey fulfilled their dream. The whole village was at the wedding. "My dears, though you are still so young, I congratulate you." My mother was crying for some reason. "Mummy, why tears in her eyes? Today is such a happy day," Selina told her. It was just a happy day. Everyone was happy, having fun. Harvey had asked the chairman for a plot of land for a house before the wedding, and now he was continuing the construction. The boy wanted the house to be big, strong, just like their family would be. Selina had gone to work, as usual, first thing in the morning. She was sitting in a semi-dark room going through letters when she felt a heaviness in her stomach. The girl immediately thought of a child, although no one had ever told her about it. When her older coworker came in, she decided to ask her, "Nancy, tell me, here is my stomach pulls. Can it be pregnancy?" She asked the woman. "Well, Olka, you give just a stomach prick, and she immediately thinks that she is pregnant," laughed the woman. But the girl was sure of it. She wanted children so much that she couldn't believe that it didn't work out. At home, she told her husband everything, and he, as well as Nancy, was distrustful of his wife's words. But when a few months passed, Selina's words were confirmed. She was indeed pregnant. It was such happiness, but this child was not destined to be born. Once Selina was walking to one of the houses for work, and Evan rode by on a cart. For some unknown reason, the horse bucked and sped off. Selina was in its path. Evan, as best he could, didn't want to hurt the girl, but he failed. She didn't realize how it happened, but a moment later, the girl was lying unconscious on the side of the road. "You killed the girl! You killed the girl!" Evan shouted. He still couldn't stop the mad horse. The people who heard this immediately ran that way. They saw the girl, started to lift her up, and took her to a doctor. The local medical center couldn't do anything, so they took her to the hospital. Yes, she lost the baby, but that wasn't the most important thing right now. "Tell me, what's wrong with her?" Harvey begged tearfully. "She has very serious injuries. The doctor at the hospital couldn't say anything clear yet. She needs time, patience, and good care. I'll do anything for her." My husband was really ready for it. After the conversation with the doctor, he sat in the ward and never left his wife's side. Her mother came to visit, her father visited, but her husband was always there. When Selina regained consciousness, he fed her with a spoon, helped her to get up. She was so sweet and small and beautiful. Selina's face had taken a bit of a hit in the fall, and now there was a large scar on one cheek. But it seemed to Harvey that this scar only made her prettier. He complimented her and supported her in everything, and she only smiled and covered her face. They returned to the village a few months later. Selina limped, but no one noticed. At night, the girl cried. "Come on, my darling." Harvey stroked her head. "Harvey, what about our baby? That's what hurt the most. We'll have more children. Don't worry, he could always support her." "I want to go to the doctor to find out why I can't get pregnant." Her mother came to the house. "There's nothing for you to do there, in this town," she said. "Then what?" Selina was getting desperate. "So, today you and I will go to your grandmother Maddie, in the neighboring village," her mother told her and took her daughter's hand to support her. "What can she do, your Maddie?" Selina really didn't believe that some otherworldly force could help her get pregnant. She remembered that a few years ago, her husband had told her about a baby from the orphanage, but she didn't want to think about it yet. Selina agreed with her mother, and they drove together to a neighboring village. It was indeed said about Maddie that she healed people, helped them in different life situations. The woman and the girl entered the house. Selina immediately saw that Maddie was sitting at the table. She wasn't that old, though everyone called her a grandmother. "So, what took you, wench, so long to come to me?" she asked her. "I don't know." The girl was confused. "Come on, come in, I'll solve your problem." Grandmother took out some herbs, whispered something on them, smoked, gave Selina to drink some tincture. After that, she told her that everything would be fine. Selina left Matrona's grandmother. She looked at her mother and smiled. "Well, did she help you?" The woman spent all that time on the street outside the house. "Yeah, right, they were coming home." Harvey was looking forward to it. He still loved his wife and was willing to do anything for her. A year passed, 2, 3, 5. There was no change in their family. One day Selina decided to make kvass. She added bread and breadcrumbs to the container, and when she began to add the leaven, she felt so bad that she even had to run outside. "What's wrong?" Her husband ran out to help her. "I don't know. It got so bad." She looked at him. Harvey saw that Selina was very pale. "Why don't we go to the medic?" He suggested she go. When they arrived, the man who was supposed to help Selena smiled. "Well, Selena, your dreams have come true," he told her. Everyone in the village knew how much she wanted children and that she couldn't do it. It couldn't be. Selena almost fainted. Indeed, she was pregnant. Harvey carried his wife in his arms. Now he wouldn't let her go anywhere. She couldn't even go to the store. He did everything for her. They went to the hospital before the appointed time. Everything had to be perfect. The whole pregnancy, the woman felt good. Nothing was going to happen. She was sure of it. Her stomach began to pull in the evening. Selena told the doctor about it. She was so looking forward to meeting her firstborn. When the baby's cry sounded in the room, the doctor congratulated Selena on the birth of her baby, a son. The woman lay and cried. After that, she did not leave the baby for a minute. When they returned home, the whole village celebrated the event. "Now I am the happiest person in the world," she told Harvey. There was a lot of crying in the house, but Mom was always there. She had waited so long for this moment that she tried to stretch the time while the baby was small. Selena loved to sit by the crib and tell stories and poems to the baby. The one, when he heard the mother's voice, quieted down. After the birth of her first child, not even a year passed before Selena felt sick again. She turned to her husband, looked at him with big eyes. "It can't be," he said. "Harvey, I'm so happy. Was it really Grandma Maddie who helped me then, or was it just self-hypnosis?" She hugged him. "I don't know what it was, but I'm happy too." He held her close. And this time it went exactly the same way as the first time. Harvey did everything himself. He didn't let his wife do any of the work. She was only taking care of the baby and preparing for the second one. She was in the hospital again, though nothing bothered her, but she was worried about her son, how he would be without her. She would sooner give birth and go home, she said to her neighbors in the ward. "And how did you just decide? The first is still small, and you are all ready for the second." Young girls were surprised. "I've dreamed about it all my life, and now everything is coming true," Selena said quietly. She already knew, when she started to feel a little tingle in her lower abdomen, that it was starting. She still hadn't forgotten after the first time what to do, so there were no problems. And this time the boy showed up. "There you go, Barry. You'll soon see your brother Alex," Mommy was telling the little lump in the maternity ward, and Harvey was walking under the windows. He didn't want to be shown his son or anything. He was just happy for his family. There were 4 of them in the house now. Alex was already taking confident steps, talking, and Barry was lying in his crib. Grandmother often came to visit her grandchildren, but she could not hold them in her arms for a long time because she was sick. No sooner had they rejoiced at the birth of their second child than there was grief in the family. Selena's father died. It was very painful, but she did not get upset and did not cry, afraid that the milk would disappear. After that, her mother moved into their house. There was enough room for everyone, and the extra hands came in handy. "I wish we had another girl," Harvey said to Selena at night. "Oh, we've had enough of 2, thank God for that." She looked in the corner where the icon stood. "A girl would be nice," Harvey insisted. Selena was happy. Alex went to kindergarten. Barry was in his grandmother's care. Selena wanted to go out to work. Harvey didn't mind. He always agreed with his wife. But Selena had to work just 6 months because after that time she felt pregnant again. Why didn't it happen before? She wondered. Apparently it was necessary that you had to have children now, her mother told her. Yes, if only 10 years earlier, the woman sighed. But she didn't want to do anything. If God gives a child, it must come into the world. And again, she was in the same hospital. The doctor smiled when he saw her. "You come here often," he joked. "As long as I can, I will give birth," the patient calmly answered him. Nothing new happened. Still the same room, the long corridor on which she walked when everything began. And for the 3rd time Selena had a son named Billy. The baby was born painful. but the doctor convinced the woman that it was not worth worrying too much. But Selena was still very upset and let him be disabled, but that it would not affect his life in any way. There was another family member in the house. The older boys were already helping their father with some things. They were doing something funny, stomping their feet, eating at the table. Father and mother were only happy about it. One day Alex came home from kindergarten with a broken nose. What happened? His mother didn't understand. It's nothing. The boy waved his hands, playing with the guys. The woman saw that she was raising very good sons. She realized that she had to give them education, show and tell them everything that she herself knows how to do. Harvey was directly involved in this as well. When the boys were in school, his father told and showed them how to drive a car, a tractor. They studied some details, all of which could only be marveled at, which is what Selena did. Her mother was already very old. She had been lying down for a long time. The woman took care of her, but she too was gone at some point. Selena cried. Her children and husband supported her in everything. But there was no time to grieve for a long time. It was necessary to work, bring up children and everything else. While studying at school, the boys planned to stay in the village, not to go anywhere, to help their father and mother, as well as their collective farm. But the older the boys got, the more often their thoughts changed. And now Alex had finished school, and it was necessary to go to serve in the army. His mother was very upset about it. "Alex, be careful there," she asked him. It was not a peaceful time. In some places there was a fierce war. "Oh, mother, don't worry. Everything will be all right," he promised her. The boy left. He wrote letters about how and where his days were going. Told about the new friends he met. The whole family would write him back. His mother, too, would post everything that happened during the days that there were no letters. She was very worried and waiting for her son. Alex was coming back from the army. The train was stopping in the city. When the guy got out there on the platform, he decided to walk around a little. A few friends came with him, and he stayed with them. "Well, Alex, maybe in a cafe. Let's meet some girls," his friend offered him. "I don't mind," Alex said. He was in the city not often, only when he and his father came to the store. So now he was interested in everything. With a friend they came to some cafe. There were really young girls there. They were brightly painted and dressed the same way. Alex liked it all so much, he walked over to one of them when they had been sitting for a while. "Hi," he said to the girls. "Go to your boyfriend." One of them turned around. "And I wanted to meet you." He was naive. After not much persuasion, the girls finally agreed to meet. They moved to the table with the guys, and the evening continued with the four of them. "You're not like the rest of the city," Katie said as Lyosha walked her home. "What's that? Handsome?" he'd assumed. "Fuck you." She waved her hands at him. Alex was proud of himself. It was the first time he was walking down the street with a girl. There were girls in the village, but they were all friends. And now here he was, he met her, and now he was walking her home. "Tomorrow I will come," he asked her at the entrance. "Come." She opened the door and walked into the darkness. The guy was returning to his friend, thought that here he would linger for more than one day. "Victor, why? I'll live with you," he asked his friend. "If you want, you can," he shrugged. After that, Alex started dating Katie. He wrote to his mother in the village that he stayed in the city, but she beckoned him to come home. "Katie, will you come with me?" he told her. "What's there to do in your village?" It was obvious she'd never go there, never live there. "I'll introduce you to my parents. Tell them we're going to live in the city," he insisted. She agreed only after 2 weeks. Victor, where Alex lived, had already hinted to him several times that it was time to move out. He promised him that as soon as they returned from the village, he would get a job and figure out what to do about the housing. "Here now we will come. You will see what a huge house I have, brothers, mother, and father," he told her. "Oh, what haven't I seen there?" She looked away out the window. The girl liked the young man, but living in the village was not her story. She wanted to be in the city. When they arrived, Selina immediately saw what kind of person her son's fiancée was. She was very brightly painted, wearing a short skirt. Her blouse barely covered her stomach. "Alex, where did you find her?" his mother asked him. "Mom, stop it," he soothed her, but the woman didn't want to stop. She had lived life, knew that with this girl her son would not have a good family. While Alex and Katie were visiting his mother, a summons came that Barry was also drafted into the army. "How could it be? I didn't have time to meet one, and already the second one should be sent," the woman lamented. But Barry was ready for it. He looked at his brother and wanted him to be the same. In general, boys from childhood repeated everything after each other. The send-off was over. Barry left for the army. Alex and Katie went into town. There, the boy went to get a job in the police. They took him in, even gave him a place to live. Now, he and Katie had a place to live. "So, my darling, marry me." He brought her home a ring. "How long did you think about it?" She looked at him. "What's the matter?" Alex didn't understand. "How long have I been waiting for this ring?" She hugged him. "My mother suggested we get married in the village. There's more space there. All the relatives and acquaintances, but Katie didn't want it. She wanted her wedding to be in a restaurant, to be upscale. Harvey and Selina and Billy came along. Of course, it wasn't a big deal, but her son got married anyway. "Mom, why are you so serious?" Alex asked her. "You know I don't like your Katie," she told him after the wedding. "It's not for you to live with her." Was the son offended? "Okay." The woman wanted to hug Alex, but he went to the bride. Selina wiped her tears and went to her husband too. The young people began to live in the very apartment that Alex was allotted from work. They were happy. Alex worked. He was praised by his superiors, and after a while, the husband came home with bad news. "Nin, don't worry," he said to his wife. "What happened?" She looked at him. "I'm being sent to a hot spot," he replied. "How can that be?" She came over and hugged him. "Now everyone goes there in order, so don't worry, I will definitely come back." He was afraid because already several of his comrades had gone there and did not return. "Will you tell your mother?" she asked. He knew she would be very upset, but there was no way out. He could not notify the most dear woman. That same weekend, they went to the village to tell his parents. Selina, as soon as she heard it, immediately started sobbing. She didn't understand why he had to do it, putting himself in danger. But the guy said that a lot of people had already left work, so it was his turn. Alex left. Katie stayed home alone. Some time passed, and the girl found out that she was pregnant. What was to do at home alone? She did not understand. The girl put aside all her pride and the rest, got ready and went to Selina's village. "Hello." She stood on her mother-in-law's doorstep. "Come in if you're here," she told her. "You know, Alex is gone, and we're going to have a baby soon." She touched her stomach. Selina clapped her hands. "I'm going to be a grandmother soon." There was a lot to be happy about, but there was also a lot to be happy about, because one son was in a hot spot, and the other was in the army. Katie decided to stay with Selina, who was helping her with everything. "I'm sorry for the way I acted before," the girl told her. "It's all right. All young people are like that." The woman smiled. She had grown fond of her daughter-in-law, and now she didn't seem the same as before. There was no news from Alex at all. The women were very worried about it. They checked with him at work, but they were kept in the dark. Katie was very upset and cried a lot. "Are you crying?" Her mother came into her room. You know, her hormones were playing up, and now she was going through so much, she didn't believe Alex would come back. Katie was called to the station. When the uniformed man saw her rounded belly, he couldn't say a word. Talk already, she couldn't stand it. It looked like she was going to faint. "Your husband died heroically," he told her. "What?" Katie's eyes widened. She staggered. Please calm down. He handed her a glass of water. What did you just say to me? She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Please excuse me, but I had to tell you that. The policeman didn't know how to justify himself. Katie sat down on the chairs that stood there. She was in such shock that she couldn't even cry. Various thoughts were running through her mind, the main one being how to inform her mother. How would she react to this terrible news? But it had to be done. Alex's colleague wrote down the address where the body would be delivered, promised it would be done. After that, he saluted and went to his office. Katie had to go back to the village, but she didn't know how to do it. She went to the train station, bought a ticket, but not for the near future, but for the evening. Until then, she wondered how she would bring bad news to her husband's house. When she arrived at the village, she stood for a long time near the gate, not daring to go in. Suddenly, she saw Harvey walking down the street. "Katie, what are you standing there for?" he asked her. "I don't know how to get in," she replied. "Is something wrong?" He tensed up because he saw his sister-in-law's eyes crying. "Yes," she answered quietly, and didn't know how to say the next words. "That's it. Let's go to the house. You'll tell us everything there." He took her under his arm and led her into the gate. Katie sat at the table, eating no food, touching nothing, just staring at one point. "Why were you called in?" Selina was in the kitchen. "Alex is dead," she answered simply, still staring at the spot she was staring at. "What?" Selina felt like her heart had stopped. "I also reacted there," the girl replied. The mother sat down on a chair. It was as if the house was short of air. Harvey handed her a glass of water. He too could not take in this information, but held on. When the zinc coffin was brought to the house, then everyone believed it had really happened. Alex was buried by the whole village. Many nice words were said, but it couldn't help his mother. Katie was taken away by ambulance from the event. "I don't know how to live without him," the wife said, when she returned to her mother-in-law's house. "Kathy, this is our shared grief, and we will get through it together." They sat hugging each other in the kitchen. "I should write to Barry," Billy said one day. "Don't you dare," his mother turned on him. Why, he'd have to know his brother was gone, the boy wondered. He's there now, and they might take him there too. And he was repeating everything after his brother. "He'll go. They'll bring him back too," said the mother, not knowing that her words would be prophetic. Kathy gave birth to a baby girl. It was such a joy for Harvey, for he had longed so much for a daughter. He never left her side. "I should probably go into town," she told her husband's parents. "What are you going to do there?" "Stay here. It's so nice. Get a job somewhere. We'll look after our granddaughter," Selina begged her. "I can't stay here. Everything reminds me of him." Katie began to cry, but she stayed anyway. Selina got her a job at the same post office where she'd once worked. She and Harvey stayed at home and only took care of their granddaughter. It was time for Barry to come home from the army. He also came with a girl. It is not known where they met. The family sat down at the table. When the boy learned about what had happened to his brother, he cried. "Why didn't you write me?" he shouted. "Son, believe me, it was necessary." His mother came up to him. They met his girlfriend. Her name was Ekaterina. She lived near the place where the son served. That's where they met. "If you want to live separately, you can go to your grandmother's house," Selina offered them. Barry and Catherine agreed to the offer. They were now living in Selina's mother's house. At first, everything was fine between them, but more and more often Catherine began to go to the city. She was there for several days. Barry was nervous. Once the girl left once again, she was not there for a long time. Barry even went to look for her, but could not find her. The guy was very psychotic and decided that there was nothing more for him to do here. He went to the military enlistment office and asked to be contracted. "Barry, no," cried his mother, and knelt in front of him when he told her this. "I will go and avenge Alex," he said. "Please don't," Katie joined the woman. "Why are you so afraid for me? Nothing will happen to me." He was smug. Selina knew there was no changing her son's mind. She was glad that Billy had been exempted from all this for health reasons. He wasn't going into the army. Barry left home too, and soon Kathy moved to town. So there we are, you and me alone in our old age, Selina said to her husband. What about me? Billy looked at them. And you, son, you're with us. His mother hugged him. For some reason, she felt so sad that she couldn't put it into words. Lately, the woman had been crying a lot. She didn't understand how such a happy family could fall apart so quickly. Don't be sad, Selina. There will be a holiday on our street, Harvey told her. But her mother could not help it. Tears rolled from her eyes. Barry had stopped writing. She worried about her son. You know him. He hasn't written to us since the army, Harvey reassured her. Mom, Dad, stop grieving. Meet Aurora, my fiancée. As if at a concert, Billy presented his girlfriend. Jesus, Billy, where are you going? Mom got up from her chair. Why? Everybody's allowed and I'm not. He wondered. She knew Aurora from childhood. The girl was 2 years younger than her son. She was in contact with her parents, so the girl was warmly welcomed into the house. Every day Billy walked with her, and his parents were happy for him. Well, and you said, sick, and look, his father was also happy that his son had found a bride. Billy did not wait long. After a short time of their communication, he proposed to the girl. The parents on both sides approved of the marriage. The wedding was played by the whole village. Although the mother was not so cheerful, but she tried not to show it. When everyone was about to go home, Selina was approached by a girl who worked at the post office. She took her hand and looked her straight in the eye. What? Selina tensed. Barry, she said. Barry what? The mother didn't understand. Missing, the girl muttered. I don't understand. The mother sat down on a chair. Missing. A telegram came. The postal worker explained. It came today. She handed her a small piece of paper. Selina looked at the girl for a long time and then closed her eyes with her hands and began to just howl. Tears were no longer enough to mourn this grief. Selina, what's the matter with you? Harvey ran up to her at once, but she went on. Then the man spoke to the girl, and she told him everything. They went home in silence. Nobody knew what to say to each other. We won't bury her, the mother said at once. Bury who? Harvey didn't understand. No one. He's gone, and let him be gone. He's gone, and he doesn't write letters, she answered her husband. It seemed as if his wife had gone mad, but he said nothing. Harvey tried to keep his cool, but inner worries made themselves felt. One day the man became ill. He was taken to the hospital, and from there he already came lying down. It was even more difficult for Selina now. She was worried about everything that had happened, and also had to walk behind her husband, who could not even get up. Harvey, honey, why do things happen like this? As if someone had jinxed her, she sat crying by his bedside. I'm sorry, he told her. Why should I forgive you? She fell on his chest. Because he couldn't die, but he condemned you to such agony. He kept thinking about it. What are you talking about? Come on, you die too. That's all I need. She started to tell him off. It was all very sad. How are Billy and Aurora doing? Harvey asked. They're doing fine, the woman said. Billy and Aurora had actually moved into the same house where Grandma used to live. They were planning their lives, wanting to be parents. Billy, let's go fishing, his wife told him. What are you doing fishing? It's cold outside, he laughed back at her. Why? We'll catch fresh fish, I'll make a pie, she promised him. But Billy didn't understand her zeal. You're so imaginative. He picked her up in his arms and spun her around. Aurora laughed. She loved her husband very much. Selina was glad that at least her youngest son was doing well. She went to visit them every day, bringing home cooked meals. Mom, I want to go to work, her son once told her. You what? What work with your health? The woman was afraid for him. You say the same thing. I do everything around the house, He pointed to the cabinets, which he had recently made himself. "I don't know, you can try," she shrugged and turned away. The next day, they went together to a man who ran a sawmill in their village. "Hello, Robert," she approached him. "Hello," he smiled. "Listen, Fedyoshka wants to work. Will you take him on as a helper?" Selena didn't like to ask, but she wanted to do something nice for her son. "Of course, I always need workers." He was glad that the boy was willing to work. The next day, the boy came on shift. At first, there was a lot of confusion, but eventually he got into it. "Selena, can't we at least put a cross on Barry?" her husband asked her. "Why?" She didn't understand. "To have a place to come and remember," Harvey cried. "I'll think about it. My mother's been more quiet lately. So, come on, let's try to get up." Now that there was no one in the house but her and her husband, she decided to help him. It was difficult, but they tried. And after 6 months, the man could sit up in bed. It made it very easy to take care of him. Billy and Aurora came to visit his parents over the weekend. They planned to heat the bathhouse and then all sit around the table together. The parents were happy when their children came to visit them. They tried to do everything for them. Right now, Harvey was sitting in bed, talking to Aurora. She worked in the library, read books, and told the man different interesting stories. "Bath is ready." A young man entered the house. "Son, you should at least eat," splashed his mother's hands. Lately, as he went to work, lost a lot of weight. "He will succeed," he smiled. Everyone went to wash in order. Billy helped his mother and father. Everything in life seemed to be getting better. Kathy arrived, bringing her grandparents a granddaughter. She was a bright girl, and Selena liked to play with her. A daughter-in-law asked her husband's parents to keep their daughter, at least until the end of the summer. She had to work, and the girl had nowhere to go. The old people agreed, and the house became noisy and cheerful. "Veronica, get up." Her grandmother woke her up in the morning. There was a lot to do. The girl wrinkled her nose. She wasn't used to waking up so early. But she couldn't disobey her grandmother, so she stretched and got up. "That's it, Harvey. I think happiness has come to our house." She sat by his bedside in the evening. Yes, Veronica was better, her husband confirmed. It was necessary to go and ask if the girl would be accepted to the local kindergarten, so Selena did. She was answered positively, so the girl had to be prepared for it. "I'll go to town, buy some outfits for Veronica," Selena was going to. "Be careful out there." Her husband was worried about her. "Don't worry," she walked out of the house. Grandfather called his granddaughter. She came to him, climbed with her feet on the bed, and he began to read to her. Now, every morning Selena took her granddaughter to kindergarten. At first the girl cried, but then she got used to it. She had new friends. Katie hadn't been here for a long time, Selena said. The woman brought her daughter to them and never showed up again. Selena and Harvey didn't know where she was or what was going on. "It's okay, the granddaughter is with us. That's the most important thing," Harvey smiled. Katie, when she arrived in town, immediately started looking for a job. She got a job, but her daughter was sick a lot, so she had to take sick days. Because of this, at work grumbled. The girl quit. When money became quite bad, she brought the girl to her grandparents. "Hello," she came to one of the institutions. "Come in." An imposing man sat at the table. "I'd like to apply for a job with you." Katie behaved very modestly. "I've looked at your documents. You're a good fit for us." He slid a paper to her to write an application. Katie couldn't believe how quickly she had gotten the job. She had written everything she needed to write. Tomorrow was her first day of work. "Don't be late," the supervisor said. "Deal." She said goodbye and left the office. At home, she prepared everything for tomorrow, took a bath, and lay down to rest. She was shown her workplace, told what to do, and by the evening of the first day, the boss called her to him. "Richard Anatolievich, did you call?" She looked into his office. "Yes, Katie, come in." He showed her to a chair. She went through, sat down. She didn't know what she could have done on her first day to get to this office. Did I do something wrong? She didn't look at him. No, it's fine. It's just that when you left yesterday, I couldn't get over you all day. He just switched to you, without any warning. So, Katie didn't know what he was getting at. Why don't we go out together? The boss suggested it. Come on, she flared up. What's the big deal? You're young, you're single, I'm single. Why don't we try it? He said it all calmly. Good, Katie agreed because she thought if she said no, she'd be fired immediately. That's the deal, then I'll stop by in a couple hours. He stood up, walking to the door. As Kathy walked out, he took her hand and kissed it. See you later. She walked out of the office, her face red. What did they tell you in there? The girls in her office came over right away. Nothing, just talking about work, she lied. Understandably, it was obvious that her co-workers didn't believe her. Kathy prepared for the meeting. Richard was handsome, successful, and young. She didn't know what they would talk about. But when an hour had passed, the girl calmed down, and then she took her time. She was in the driveway when he pulled up in front of her. Hi, he got out of the car and opened the door for her. Already saying hello, she chuckled. Get in, he helped her in. Thank you. No one had ever looked after her like that before. They drove to a restaurant that was the only one in this town. Katie suddenly began to worry. What if he asked her to do something later, for this dinner? She didn't mind meeting Richard, but she knew absolutely nothing about him. Have a seat. He pulled back a chair and waited for Katie to sit down. Thank you. She never tired of thanking him today. The young man ordered wine, something from the food, then put the menu aside, sat and looked at his companion. What? She was embarrassed. Nothing, just looking at how beautiful you are. He took her hand in his. It feels good, she lowered her eyes. Let's drink to our future. He raised his glass. Good. Katie wondered at the man. They saw each other for the first time yesterday, and today they are already drinking to the future. At the restaurant, he asked her how she was living, why she wasn't married, and other things. I was married. She stopped on that word because a lump came to her throat. The girl was afraid to cry. Good. I see that you do not want to talk about it. The main thing is that now you are alone. He did not pester with more questions. They sat almost until closing time. After that, Richard wanted to take her home. You drank wine, didn't you? She was surprised he was going to drive. So what, just a couple glasses? He smiled. Let's walk, and you can pick up the car later, she suggested. Okay, Richard agreed easily. They reached the house where the girl lived. Richard kissed her hand again, and they said goodbye until tomorrow. Wow, what a decent man. With those words, she walked up the stairs. In the morning, she went to work, and her boss was waiting for her. He had prepared a small bouquet of flowers for her. Why? She looked so that no one could see. Just take it. He put it in her hands. Katie was flattered. He had lifted her spirits this morning. Richard and Kathy started dating. 2 months later, after she got a job, the man suggested she move in with him and leave the firm. She hesitated for a long time, but she did what he said. You know, I need to talk to you. Kathy began one weekend. She and Richard had been living with him for 3 months. I'm listening to you very carefully. He came over and sat down next to her. I have a little daughter. She's at her grandparents' now, but I'd like to take her home. She watched the man's reaction. What daughter? He furrowed his eyebrows. Mine, Veronica, from her first husband. The girl began to worry. No, you and I will have our own daughter and son. There will be no Veronica here. Let her live at her grandmother's. You can visit her. He spoke in a stern tone, like at work. You can't do that. Katie knew she was going to cry. Why not? Some children are better off with their grandmothers than with their mothers, he said, because he had spent his entire childhood in the village with his grandmother. Well, Katie did not argue with him, but thought she would talk to him about it later. The woman missed her child very much, and after a month she could not stand it, and again brought up the subject. But Richard didn't even want to hear about it. He said that it was necessary to give birth to another. They lived together for a year, and then Katie left, at which point she came to Selina again. Wow, for the summer, her mother-in-law told her. "I'm sorry, there were just circumstances." Kathy crouched down in front of Veronica. The latter stood looking at the woman. "Hi, honey, have you forgotten me? After all, I'm your mom." She held out her hands. The girl looked at her grandmother and went to the woman. They hugged. After that they entered the house. There Katie told the woman everything. "Yes, things. Exhaled that one. You what now? Stay with us, at least for a few days." "No, I can't. I'm going home." Kathy looked at her watch. And Veronica, Selina, was scared. "Why? She's with me," stood and gave Katie a perplexed look. "How on earth can that be? Who does that? The girl has lived with us for so long, and now you're just taking her away." The mother-in-law began to cry. "Wait, but she's my daughter." She was standing there packing up the girl's things. "And you asked her. Maybe she doesn't want to go anywhere," practically screamed Grandma. At that moment Harvey woke up. "What's going on in there?" he shouted from the room. "Here, Katie is taking Veronica away," Selina said loudly. "Taking her away how?" I could hear that the man was agitated too. The woman sat down on a chair. How much more loss she would have to endure in her life. "Don't worry, we'll definitely come to you again." The daughter-in-law wanted to approach the woman, but the woman made a gesture that told Katie not to. "You go, and don't forget your grandparents." She hugged and kissed Veronica. At that moment, the girl cried loudly. She unhooked herself from her mother and ran to her grandfather. "What's going on? Were you turning her against me?" Katie started to get nervous. "What are you talking about? They're in your town with your rich fiancé. Are you completely crazy?" Selina was surprised at how her daughter-in-law had changed lately. "Don't insult me," she said. "Leave us the girl. You'll have more children," the woman begged. "No, she said that we will come to visit." She did not want to say more, took the bags, the girl, and they left the house. That night Harvey had a seizure. Selina called an ambulance and her husband was taken to a hospital in the city. "Mom, what happened?" Billy came in the next day after work. "Daddy, they took him away. He was sick." She sounded like she wasn't feeling well herself. "Are you all right?" Her son came closer to her. She wiped her face with her hand. "We should go see him." He sat down next to her. "Yes, I was thinking the same thing." She sat and looked at the beautiful tablecloth that was laid on the table. "Then in 2 days, on the weekend, we'll all go together." Billy was sure of what he was saying. At home, he told Aurora everything. She just didn't understand how a woman could be so cruel. She knew that the grandparents were fond of their granddaughter, but no, she took her away anyway. "Billy, let's move to your mother's house. It would be easier for her." She thought about it more than once. "If you don't mind, we'll do that." He was glad that his wife was so kind. A day later, they were sitting together in the kitchen as they had done when they were children. "And if he dies?" Selina asked in a trembling voice. "What are you talking about?" Her son immediately came and sat at her side. "Why, there have already been 2 attacks." The woman could not help crying. Let's not talk. Tomorrow we will go to the hospital, and there everything will become clear," concluded the guy. "Okay," the mother agreed with him. In the morning, before the trip, Selina decided to go to the cemetery to her son. She sat there on a bench, cried and told what had happened. Afterward, she looked at Alex's picture for a long time, thinking that she should bring Barry here too. It was time to get to the station. Selina said goodbye to her son, kissed the picture, and went. "Where have you been so long?" Billy was afraid he'd be late. "Went to the cemetery. She saw that the bus was not yet. Why then was her son so nervous? But she knew that Billy did that a lot. They arrived, talked to the doctor. He walked them to the room. Harvey was lying on the bed. Everything they'd been trying to accomplish for so long was gone at once. The man lay there again and did not move. Harvey, his wife, came up to him and kissed him. "I'm sorry," he barked again, but now his speech was very slurred. "Mommy, don't be so upset." Billy hugged her. "I won't. I feel sorry for Harvey. He's a burden." She wiped away the tears that were almost gone. They were back at the station, waiting for the bus. They had to hire a car to get back, but it was no big deal. Harvey, his wife, entered the room. He turned his head and looked with such sad eyes that the sobs came to his throat again. "Leave me here. What do you need me for?" Harvey was crying now. "Don't you remember what we promised before the altar? For better and for worse, for better and for worse, for the rest of our days." She went over and put her arms around her husband. "You're a saint." He pressed his cheek against her. "I just love you." She tried to lift him up to transfer him to the stroller, but couldn't. She had to call Billy. The young man quickly managed all by himself. They called a car and drove to their village. Some time passed. It was winter outside. Aurora returned from work. "Mom," she turned to Selena. "Yes." She turned around. "God finally heard you." She stood with a sweet smile and put her hands on her stomach. "No way." She walked over to her sister-in-law and hugged her. "Just don't tell Fade." "I want to tell him myself," the girl asked. "Okay, I'll go tell Grandpa." She headed for the room where Harvey was lying. Now that they had a stroller, she could walk with him. "Honey," she sat down on the bed and put her hand on his chest. "You're going to be a grandfather again soon." This was happy news. Harvey was getting worse every day. Selena left him. She was cooking dinner and humming to herself. Billy came home from work. She looked at him and smiled. "Go to your wife," his mother directed him. "What's the matter?" He was immediately alert. "Go and find out for yourself." She couldn't wait to see how he would react when he learned the truth. "I love you." She heard it from behind the closed door. "Congratulations, son." Mom hugged him and kissed him. With Alex and Barry gone, all the motherly love went to the youngest son. It was decided to bake pies, make the family's favorite dish, all gather around the table and celebrate the occasion. "I'll help." The girl came out of the room. "Thank you," thanked her mother. "You're welcome." The daughter-in-law was not difficult to do household chores. "But when I was pregnant, could not even go to the table. It was so bad." Selena remembered how it was with her. "Don't remember, you'll feel bad again." The girl hugged her mother-in-law. "You're good. How lucky Billy is." Her eyes became sad. There was so much to cook that it didn't even fit on the table. But the two hostesses made sure they could fit everything in. After that, the man was put in a wheelchair and brought to the table. Billy came in. They all sat down. "Thank you, my dear, for despite everything, you remained as kind and caring." He looked at his mother and drank his tea. "Speak words to your wife. You'll always have time for me," Selena asked her son. "And she will get it too." "Wait, by seniority." He smiled. The guy was so happy. "I can't sit any longer," groaned Harvey. "Okay." The mother raised her eyes to her son. The latter understood. He got up and carried his father back to bed. After that, he went back to his favorite women. "Well, now it was the turn of my most beautiful and beloved Aurora." He looked at his wife with so much love. "And I adore you." They drew to each other, kissed. "No, listen to me. I always knew I'd have a beautiful wife, and I did. And now I'm gonna have a baby. I believe that you will be a good hostess and mother." He again reached to the cheek of his beloved, kissed. "That's it. That's enough now." Aurora couldn't when Selena saw all of this. Okay. Billy laughed and started to cut the pie. And at that moment his mother took the cauldron out of the oven. After a good sit-down, everyone dispersed. Selena was talking to Harvey about something, and Billy and Aurora went to their room. "Son, get up. It's time to go to work." Billy's mom knocked on Billy's room. "I am all ready." She heard his voice and went to prepare breakfast. Everything was going well. The daughter-in-law was going to work. She had nothing left before her maternity leave. Billy was working. His boss was praising him. His mother couldn't help but be pleased. Except Harvey was fading from day to day. "I'm not well. Everything hurts," her husband often said. Then Selena would give him a shot. "I understand everything, dear," stroked his wife on the head. "Hurry up," exhaled the man. "Don't," Selena snuggled up to him. "Let him be like this. But he's home. Here he is lying talking to her." She forbade herself to even think of anything bad. Months passed. Aurora was already on maternity leave. Soon the family was going to have a baby. Selena had prepared a corner in the children's room for the baby to be brought in, and everything was already in place. The daughter-in-law started packing for the hospital. "Are you sure you've packed everything?" The mother-in-law was worried. "Yes," she pointed to the bag. To make sure, Selena started to check everything. He and Billy together sent the girl from the station. The son wanted to go with his wife, but his mother talked him out of it, said she'd go when it happened. A week and a half passed. A woman came from the post office saying that Aurora had given birth. She'd contacted her parents, and they asked her to tell Selena. "Billy." Mom ran into the room. "Happy news, you're a daddy." He started running, jumping, then packed up and went to his wife's house. They were gone for a few days, and then they came back. Selena had already notified all the neighbors that they would soon have a party. Selena couldn't look at the baby. He looked just like her eldest son. "Mom, did you see? He's just like Alex," Billy immediately told her. Don't tell me," she stopped him. "Good, I understand how hard it is for you," her son agreed with her. The woman overcame herself. She helped her daughter-in-law in everything. And the girl's parents often came too. Selena, when she took Harry in her arms, she immediately went back many years. There, she gave birth to her first boy, sat and told him stories. "Mommy," she shuddered. Aurora came up to her. "Oh yes," she handed the boy to her. After that, the girl would go to feed him and put him to bed. "How's the milk?" The mother-in-law was worried. So far so good. Paula liked that the woman was worried about her. Billy continued to work. Now he was trying to bring in more money. He took on extra work. He had to meet the cars that brought in logs and boards. "Aren't you overstretching yourself?" His mother was worried about him. "No, you're not. It's a little more difficult, but I handle everything," and he wasn't fooling. That afternoon he left for work in the morning. Harry was crying hard. Aurora couldn't tear herself away from him to see her husband off. Billy, happily, shouted his wife from the room. "I love you," her husband answered her. "Son, wait," Selena wanted to go over to him and hug him. "What are you all doing today? As if I'm leaving forever," laughed the young man. "Come on," the mother frowned. "Okay, Dad, bye." He never addressed his father. He answered nothing, only breathed heavily. Billy came to the sawmill. He took the tasks that needed to be done today. 2 cars were due. It was 2 hours away, so the guy went to do the main job. He had to saw some long lumber. "You working?" The owner stopped by. "Yeah," he looked up at him. "Well, don't forget about the cars," the man reminded him. Billy hadn't forgotten about it. He finished and went to the gate. He saw that the cars were on their way. All that remained was to meet them, show them where to stand, and then pile up the boards. Billy had everything calibrated. He waved to the driver, who followed his directions. "Hi," he opened the doors and shouted to the guy. "Drive through." Billy hurried him along. The car was parked where it was supposed to be. Billy walked to the side, started to open it. There was no telling who was to blame for the situation, but for some reason the boards were loose. Whoever had assembled them hadn't thought of that. They immediately started falling out of the back of the truck. Billy didn't have time to get away. He was crushed, and the boards kept falling. Jesus, boy! The driver was awake, and he ran over to where it had just happened. What's going on? The man in the second car came over. Get Robert. The first one told him about the chief. Everyone started running, fussing. Finally, something stopped falling out of the car. Robert was already here by then. They scattered the fallen boards. Billy was unconscious. Call an ambulance, the man ordered, and went into the office. He sat at his desk, clutching his head. How could this have happened? What would he say to Selena now? How would he look her in the eye? The ambulance took a long time to arrive, but it was here. Billy was loaded onto a stretcher. He was alive. In the car, they began to administer first aid. But after a few kilometers out of the village, the guy stopped breathing. His injuries were incompatible with life. Bring Harry here, Selena said to her sister-in-law. Now, will you go for a walk? The girl asked. Yes, now I'll dress Harvey, and we can go out for a while, was the usual conversation. Selena, Aurora, a neighbor ran into the house. What are you? Someone died. Looked at him, woman. Yes, Fedka. He couldn't catch his breath. What are you saying? He was at work. The mother was still tending to the baby. And died there. The boards piled up, clarified the guest. That can't be. Selena almost dropped the baby from her arms. The man was still talking when Aurora came into the kitchen. Is it true? She looked at him with big eyes with tears in them. Son. She heard the woman moan from Harvey's bedroom, followed by some wheezing. She couldn't move. Mom, Uncle Harvey's not feeling well, Aurora shouted. But for Selena, nothing existed anymore. She heard and saw everything, but felt nothing. As Aurora came toward her and began to shout, her mother-in-law flinched. Your husband is dying, the girl shouted at the whole house. So, what I want too. Why should we live now if there is no one around? No one, she repeated. Aurora put Harry in the crib and herself ran to her father-in-law. But what could she do? Harvey turned his head toward the kitchen where his wife sat. He could no longer speak, only stare. At the last moments, Selena came to her senses. She stood up and walked over to her husband. I'm sorry, the man exhaled. He put his hand on his wife's shoulder as she leaned over him. He closed his eyes and he was gone. No, Harvey. The woman screamed as if she was being cut. Mom, Aurora was also having a hard time, but someone had to remain adequate in this situation. That evening, Selena sat on a chair in the center of the kitchen, a glass of sedative in her hands. Mom, the girl approached her quietly. But there was not a sound from the woman. She just froze. It seemed that she did not even breathe. We have a lot to do tomorrow, Aurora continued. And how can you be so calm? With only one lip, she spoke in the voice of a mother who had lost everyone. I have a child. If I put my hands down, who will be by his side? I advise you to pull yourself together too, she said in a calm tone. That night was the worst night of the woman's life. She lay on the bed and looked up at the ceiling. Robert came in. He said something, offered compensation. What's the point of all this now if you can't bring people back? In the morning, the real preparations began. Both father and son were to be brought in the next day. Selena did everything on automatic. She saw how hard it was for her daughter-in-law. She had to pull herself together. And so, her loved ones stood in the house. They looked as if they were alive, just asleep. Harry was crying. Selena and Aurora were crying too. Come on, there are people coming, the woman called out to Aurora. The girl's mother was here. She was helping with the baby. No one from the village could believe that this could have happened. Almost the entire population was in the cemetery. Saying goodbye, the mother threw a handful of earth. And then, tears sprang from her eyes. They hadn't been for so many years, and now she couldn't stop. Don't cry, Aurora hugged her. You still have grandchildren. But there was no way those words could soothe Selina's heart. She looked at all the people gathered. She realized that everyone was grieving. But tomorrow, they would simply forget that these two people had once lived. She returned home. It was cold and empty. No one here. Aurora said she would go to her mother's for a while and then come back. Her mother-in-law realized that the wench was about to move out on her. Why would she want to live with a strange woman when she had her own mother a couple of houses away? The woman didn't want to eat or drink. She just lay on the bed where her husband had lain for several years. "Mom," she heard Aurora come in. "I'm here," she said, but never got up. "We came. Put the grandson to his grandmother." "Okay, will you go to your parents now?" This worried her most of all. Why do we have to live together? Aurora did not look into the woman's eyes. I knew it. The tears flowed down her cheeks again. "No need to be upset. We live next door. I will come often, and you can come to us even every hour," the girl reassured her. Selina patted the girl's hand. She realized that she was still young and could build another life. Today the girl stayed here. She was afraid to leave her mother-in-law alone, and in a few days, as she said, she moved to her parents. Selina did not have any classes left. For herself, she did not want to do anything. She spent all her time in the cemetery. There was one grave. Her mother still brought a picture of her middle son. "Well, my darlings, now you are all together. Why am I left here all alone?" She spoke to her closest people. Selina, a local worker, came up to her. "Wow, you scared her." She looked around. "I see you here every day. I thought I'd come over." He was looking at pictures of the people who were buried here. "What else am I supposed to do?" She was crying. "Go to church. Pray for their souls," advised the one. "You'll see, it will be easier." The woman thought that was a good idea. And why hadn't she thought of it before? She got up and walked towards the temple. There she really felt better. From that day on, she started coming here every day, praying. Not good. Her sister came to her one day. "Yes, my heart is breaking from the pain in my chest," Selina confessed to her. "I understand." She closed her eyes. "I pray, I put candles on, I get relief." It was true. Slowly the woman came back to life. She realized that she had a grandson who also needed a grandmother. Now she had another address where she visited very often. Harry was very happy to have a grandmother. If Aurora's mother worked, Selina could walk with him for days on end. "Is everything all right?" her daughter-in-law asked her every time. Yes, and even though it wasn't true, no one had to know about it. A year had passed since her husband's death. Selina went to the cemetery. She wanted to stop at the store as usual, buy a wake, and then go to her family. On the way, she met Aurora. "Aren't you going to the cemetery?" she asked her daughter-in-law. "We have already been there since morning." Selina saw that the girl was in a hurry. "Are you in a hurry?" she decided to ask her. "Yes, I have to get to work while someone is there. If you could take this time with Harry, I would really appreciate it." The girl looked at her. "Of course, what are you saying? You should have brought him right away," smiled Selina. She didn't need to be begged to take a walk with her grandson. Aurora left. She was gone for a long time. Selina began to look at her watch. She thought it would be too late to get to the cemetery. "I'm sorry I was late." Her daughter-in-law came up behind her. "It's okay. I don't care when I get there." The woman went where she was going. She entered the fence, and almost immediately, the man who had told her about the church came up to her. "Can I sit here with you for a while?" he asked. Yes, she didn't mind having someone to keep her company. Selina herself started to clean up the graves. She did everything and only then sat down. All this time the man had been silent. "Thought you might want to talk." She was surprised by that. "At first I thought that too, and then I realized you don't have time to talk." He was looking at the picture of the woman's husband again. "Okay, could you go to your room? I need to talk to my husband and children," the woman asked. "Okay, have a good day." He walked between the graves. It was getting dusk outside, but Selena didn't think of going home. "My loved ones, how come I outlived everyone?" She sat on the bench and stroked her husband's portrait because he was the outermost. Out of the corner of her eye, Selena saw someone walking in the distance. At first it was scary, but then she thought it was the man who had recently left her. "No, don't think, I'm not scared," she grinned. What was there to be afraid of? Selena heard the cemetery gate creak. It should have been oiled long ago, but no one had gotten around to it. The woman turned in that direction, saw her acquaintance. "Then who's there?" She looked over to where she saw another person. A chill ran down her spine. She started to get ready to go home. Enough of this. There would be time tomorrow. She would come again. Selena got up from the bench, gathered her things, checked to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything, bent down, kissed all the pictures. When she straightened up, she almost lost her mind. There was a man standing in front of her. She fell senseless right there, on the graves of the most dear people. The woman woke up, but was in no hurry to open her eyes. First, she was going over in her head what had happened today. She was getting ready, and then he appeared. Selena opened her eyes. She was in her house. She heard someone in the kitchen. She remembered that person, would recognize him out of a million others, even though he was mutilated. But she had to be sure. "Who's there?" she shouted. Well, finally awake, a man came into the room, his face all scarred and like a burn mark. "Barry." She rushed over to him. Her heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was going to jump out of her chest. "Mom," he was hugging the woman. "Where have you been? How are you? What happened to you?" She kissed his face and bombarded him with questions. "Wait, let's eat something. I'm so hungry." He sat down at the table. Now, it was as if the mother was alive. She was ready to roll mountains. Something was already ready, but Selena didn't stop. When everything was on the table, she sat down next to her son. "Well, you what? I understand that everything is interesting, I'll tell you." The mother seemed that he did not go anywhere and did not go anywhere. "When the telegram came that you were missing, I immediately said that nothing and no one we will not bury," said the woman. "Consider me practically dead. Saw my picture there." He kept eating. "I'll clean everything up. It's just that you've been gone so long that I've already stopped believing." Selena admired her son. She thought that the prayers she was now reciting had helped her. They sat with Barry until the night before, him walking around the house, remembering what had happened. Then he went out into the yard. "Come on, I'll introduce you to my nephew." His mother didn't know what else to offer him. "Okay," he started to dress. "Aurora, are you home?" The woman knocked on the window. Yes, she looked out. She noticed the man with the disfigured face, surprised. "Do you want to come in, or do you want to come in?" Before coming in, the mother asked. "I'll be right out," the girl hurried. She gathered the child, and in a few minutes she was already on the street. "Hello," Barry greeted her. "Hello." She looked at his scars. "Scared?" He touched his hand. "No." Aurora turned to Selena with a question in her eyes. "Didn't recognize it?" the latter asked. She was glowing with happiness. "No." The surprise on the girl's face didn't go away. "Barry is mine," the woman informed her. "What?" She was so happy, she started hugging him right away. "Let's go," Selena urged them on. Barry took the stroller and drove it down the street. In the house they talked for a long time, but everyone wondered only one thing, where he disappeared for so long. "I hate to remember, but you'll have to tell me everything. It was scary." He lowered his head. "If you're not ready for it now, then you don't have to tell. When you realize that you have to do it, you'll talk it out." His mother came to him. "Okay, let's sleep together tonight, and then we'll see." He looked at Aurora. He and Harry stayed a little longer. At first the boy was afraid of his scary uncle, but then he was eager to take him in his arms. In the morning, Barry went out into the yard, where everything was in disrepair. He flooded the bathhouse and began to remodel the place. Mother saw it all. She sat and smiled. That night Selena couldn't sleep. She didn't believe it could be. So there is a God, because he heard her mother's suffering. Her son had returned. Mother, make some tea. Make it strong, Barry said. She went straight to the stove. It'll be ready in a minute, she shouted out the window. Aurora and her son were visiting again today. They were sitting at the table. What happened to Billy? The man asked. He saw that after his question, the girl was ready to burst into tears. Selena walked over to her daughter-in-law and hugged her. I'm sorry. Barry looked into her eyes. She wiped away the tears that had not yet rolled down her lashes. Okay, I'll tell you everything, he exhaled. Selena sat down next to him. She felt sorry for her son. You saw me off then, I left. First, there was a training camp, but not for long. And then we were brought there, he said, and he seemed to be immersed in his memories. Forward, the senior officer shouted to them. Come on, did you see what's going on? Barry muttered under his breath. He saw the guys running ahead of him, just falling as the bullets hit them. Barry was lying in a ditch. He saw the cover. Thought he could take cover for a while. What was the point of getting shot at? He felt someone grab him by the scruff of the neck. Don't lie here, the commander yelled in his face. Yeah, the fear was stronger than all the yelling and everything else. He made his way, but with great caution. In boot camp, when the other guys were getting to know each other, Barry sat alone. He didn't want to make friends here, so he wouldn't lose anyone later. In the evening in the tent, they discussed what losses they had suffered and what to do next. Barry was silent. He had regretted coming here more than once, but for now there was no turning back. In the evening, he was put out as a sentry. He wanted to sleep badly, but he endured it. Barry saw some lights in the distance, but he didn't think much of it. Everything all right? The commander came to him in the morning. It was cold, his uniform was wet from dew, he was shaking. Everything was fine. Barry didn't know if he'd slept the night before or not. This was the day his boys were going to attack. He saw a pop coming toward their tent. It was strange to see. The bishop went inside. Prayer began. You stay, the older man said to Dmitri. There were a few others with him. The soldiers left. There were only a few people left in the tent, as well as the bishop. Suddenly, there was a whistle and darkness. After that moment, Barry didn't know what happened. He woke up somewhere. He didn't understand anything. His whole body ached. The guy just lay there with his eyes open. You awake? He heard a man's voice with an accent. Who are you? The guy asked. Nobody, laughed the man. Barry tried to sit up, but he couldn't do it. What's wrong with me? He felt his face. It was covered in rags. You're dead, said the same voice. How? His head was a mess. You were in the tent when the explosion happened. I don't know how you did it, but everyone was blown apart, and you were thrown far away. He walked over to where the guy was lying. That's rough. Barry fidgeted on the bed. Don't move. You'll hurt yourself, he warned him. The young man continued to lie there. He tried to remember who he was, how he'd gotten here in the first place, but something was going on in his head. It seemed that here it was. The thought came, but immediately ran away. Dad, is he awake? He heard the girl's voice. Yes, come and see, he answered her. A pretty young woman approached Barry. Well, how are you? She leaned over him and started checking his bandages. I don't know. He wanted to shrug but couldn't. You have multiple fractures, burns on your face, and shrapnel wounds, she mumbled. How did I survive? It was a mystery. Thank her, the man approached. What? Barry was surprised. Daughter always pities everyone. Who can help immediately does it. And you even dragged you to the house. It was heard that the father was not pleased. What's your name? She sat next to him. Me. He was silent and rolled his eyes. Don't you remember? She shook her head. I don't know. The boy was confused. After such injuries, it was to be expected. She touched his forehead, lifted his head, looked at the wound on the back of his head. Will I remember? He was still trying to catch his thoughts. Perhaps she didn't know it herself. After that, the girl nursed Barry every day. Daddy, he should be given a name, the girl said. What do you like? He came up to her. I don't know, maybe Isa? She looked at him to see if he'd say yes or no. Okay. He pressed his lips together and went somewhere else. Your name's Isa. She went back to Barry. What? How did you know? He twitched. I made it up, she laughed. What about you? After he moved a little, his whole body ached so badly that tears came out of his eyes. Cindy, she blushed, but the guy didn't see it. Every day she sat next to him, telling him something, showing him pictures. Barry just lay there. He never remembered anything. A month passed, he could sit up on his own, but Cindy still helped him with everything. Why don't you get up? 2 months later, she offered to help him up. She brought a rake from the street, which the boy stepped on, with her standing on the other side. Barry gathered all the strength he had left in him, tensed up, and stood up. His legs were in a lot of pain. I can't, he sat back down on the bed. Okay, bear with it some more, she agreed. And again all the days they are together, she tells and he listens. The girl was very pretty. The guy didn't understand what she was doing here, so he decided to ask her about it. My mom was very sick, so my brother decided to become a doctor and help her. Got in, went to school, helped us the whole time. After graduation, he came back to do everything for the woman he loved the most. At that moment, I also went to medical school, but I had time to finish only 2 courses when my father came to pick me up and told me that my mother was dying. I came back to take care of her. We could not save her, she died. After that, my brother left. From that moment, we did not see him. Dad was having a hard time. That's why I stayed with him. I thought if I left like my brother, Dad would get sick too, Cindy cried. It's okay. Barry didn't know what to do to support her. It's okay. These moments of weakness come often, but I'm hanging in there. She smiled and wiped away her tears. I'm ready, Barry said suddenly. For what? The girl was surprised. To stand up, he said confidently. You're in pain, aren't you? She realized that he might not get up for some time. So, what? I'll manage. He was so energized by the girl's strength that he was ready for anything. Hold on, she put her shoulder to his side. It hurt a lot, but he stood up. Cindy looked up at him. She could see him clenching his teeth and breathing hard, but standing. You'll be running soon, she promised him. Why did you decide to help me? He wondered. After the explosion, the militants ran to finish off the survivors. I spotted you near the bushes, dragged you there. They didn't notice, and then I dragged you home. She didn't look at him. How did you do it? I'm thin but not light. It was true. On a piece of tarp, it was hard, but she did it. My relatives are probably looking for me, Barry suggested. You don't remember anything at all? She asked this every time. You know, it's like a thought comes to mind and it's not there. He couldn't explain it. They talked like that for hours. That's what they did. When 6 months had passed, Barry was already getting up normally, walking with a limp, but it was already progress. He helped the girl in her business, and he didn't neglect his father either. You're a good boy, Cindy said. Look, if it weren't for you, he'd shut up and just stare into her beautiful eyes. Once they were home alone, which was often, his father was away all the time. I've been living here for a year now. Why don't you try looking for my relatives? He asked her. What to look for? She was already thinking about it. He touched her cheek, where there was a terrible scar. Don't. She took his hand and pulled it away from her face. He held it in his hand, kissed her fingers. Thanked them for making it right. Barry was so gentle. That was it. She was like a tomato. Took her hand away. I like you, the guy admitted. Because there's no one else here, There's nothing to compare you to, she laughed. Do you think your father will agree to let you marry me? He asked the girl a question. I don't know, I have to ask. She turned and looked at the front door. I'll do it today, the boy promised. When the man returned, Barry challenged him to a conversation. Daughter, do you want it too? He inquired of her. Yes, she was ashamed to admit it to her father. I don't know, he's Orthodox, her father doubted. Then the boy and the girl decided to live together like that. The father himself blessed them. You're so good, Barry said to his as he called his wife. And you, Allah sent you to me, she purred in his ear. They still loved to talk, an activity that occupied most of their time. Now Barry and Cindy were taking a walk. They lived in a beautiful place, lots of greenery and trees. I'm so scared of losing you, the girl kept saying. Don't be afraid, as long as you're around, it won't happen, she assured him. Barry believed her. Now he wanted only one thing, at least to remember his name, but nothing happened. They continued to live together. It had been several years. Barry was used to everyone calling him Isa. He responded to that name. Everyone around them thought he and Cindy were husband and wife. Spiritually, they were. One day they went to a place where the terrain was mountainous. There was a creek. The girl had told Barry many times about this place, and he wanted to see it. So today they went out there. Come here, she was standing on a high ledge. Wait, not so fast. After his injuries, it was hard for him to lift his legs high. He tried. At that moment, there was a sharp sound. The girl shrieked and started to fall. No, screamed the guy. He tried to catch his beloved, but he couldn't. She fell on the rocks. Barry quickly descended, picked her up in his arms, and rushed towards the house. What happened? His father saw him. Cindy, she's been shot, cried Barry. At home, it became clear that the girl was no longer alive. Allah, screamed Barry. At one point, he got a bad headache and grabbed his head with his hands. And then, he suddenly realized clearly that his name was Barry. What? The man looked at him. He was crying too. I remembered everything. He jumped to his feet. Afterward, we buried her, and I started thinking about how to get home, but I couldn't do anything. Then my beloved's father volunteered to help me. I don't know who he arranged it with, but in a few days I was escorted to the territory of the United States. After that, I got here on my own. I went to the cemetery to tell my brother that I was alive. I came back, and there I saw you, and I approached you. The boy finished telling his story. He looked up. Aurora was sitting and crying. There were tears in her mother's eyes too. Honey, how much you had to go through, but you're home, and that's the most important thing. She did not come to him. He already understood that she was hugging him mentally. What a beautiful story, Aurora said. It was late. Harry was asleep in her arms. Would you like to stay? Selena asked her. Yes, she nodded. No one slept that night except the baby. The mother was still digesting the story she had heard from her son today. Aurora thought that the boys had to go through a lot, and Barry himself, when he remembered it all, could not calm down. Why is life so unfair? They had just found each other, and everything was cut short in an instant. Mom, we should probably go. The girl woke up early in the morning. Wait, I'll make breakfast now. She got out of bed. They went out. In the kitchen, Barry was already sitting at the table. How did you sleep? He asked. He looked tired. It was obvious that he hadn't slept. He didn't. His mother didn't elaborate. They ate breakfast together, and then Aurora got ready to go home. Shall I walk her home? Barry looked after her. Good, she wondered why. They walked out of the gate together, Selena watching them from the window. She saw her son looking at the girl. You remind me of her, he admitted. Who? The Aurora didn't understand at first. Cindy, he said the name with great affection. In what way? She wanted to know. I don't know, behavior, hair. He touched her long braids. You are good. The girl smiled at the corners of her lips. They reached her house, stopped. Will you come tonight? He cared what she answered. Yes, she looked at her son. And let's go for a walk alone. Let the grandmothers take care of Misha. He was afraid to say it, but risked it. Okay, she agreed quickly. Barry wanted to jump for joy. He went back to his mother's house and waited till evening. Aurora was waiting for him outside. Where are you going? His mother was surprised when he started to pack. I'm going for a walk. He opened the door and stepped out. What took so long? The girl was embarrassed to be standing here alone. I'm sorry, he walked over to her. The mother was watching them from the window. She thought nothing and didn't want to say anything. If they succeed, the girl will return to our family. Selena approached the icons. Would you go out with someone like me? He walked and looked in front of him. Why wouldn't I? She glanced at him. Well, I'm not exactly normal. He put a finger to his temple. It's okay. She took his hand and pulled it away. Do you know how much you look like her? He took her hand in his and started kissing it. Barry, stop. It's still early. She pulled her hand away. Okay, sorry. They walked down to the river, sat down on the bank. Will you move back in with us? He asked her. I don't even know if that would be comfortable. She watched the fine ripples appear on the water. Do you want to live in grandmother's house? He noticed the wind was picking up too. We used to live there with Billy, she said sadly. Billy's gone, but you're alive. You have a baby to raise. I'll help you, he promised. Okay, I think we're rushing things. She stood up, realizing. It's gonna start raining. Run, it's going to start raining. He grabbed her hand and pulled her towards the house. Wait, I'm going to fall. She couldn't break free. Barry stopped. Already slower, they managed to run away before the rain. He left her outside the house. He went to his own place. Do you want to go out with Aurora? From the doorstep, his mother asked. Do you mind? He froze. No, we have to go to the cemetery, talk to Billy, so he won't be offended, the woman said in all seriousness. You're serious? Barry tried to smile, but the scars prevented it from doing so fully. Of course, I generally for every trifle go there and consult. She poured boiling water into mugs. The next day, Selena, Barry and Aurora came to the cemetery. They sat on a bench, their mother talking to the monuments. Suddenly, a man Selena already knew appeared. Hello, he took a seat with them. The family responded to the greeting. Next, they talked to Barry. The man marveled at the miraculous return. For years I've been looking at your picture here, and now here you are, sitting next to me alive. The man gestured vigorously. And come and visit us tonight. The young man invited him. If you invite, I will definitely be. He looked at Selena. Why did you invite him? On the way back, his mother spoke sternly. Did you see how he looks at you? It was clear to the son. Come on, she started laughing loudly. Why? More years allowed. Why not feel happy in her old age? Barry said all this and believed that his mother deserved it. In the evening, Sam came to them. He brought a bunch of flowers, handed them to Selena. Do you know how many years I've watched you suffer? They're on those graves. He asked her in a whisper. No, she was surprised, because she herself had only recently met him. Well, let's go to the table. The man could see that the young ones were already interested in what the adults were talking about. There were casual conversations at the table. No one brought up the war or the dead. They sat and lived the moment that was happening now. Selena, I like you. Let's communicate. Sam looked at her and waited for an answer. I don't even know. She shifted her gaze to the children. Agree, her son prompted her. Good. She as a girl started to blush. After these sit-downs, Barry and Aurora started dating, as did Sam and Selena. Old men already, and yet, the woman knew that the village was already starting to talk about them. Ignore anyone. He didn't care about the gossip. A year and a half had passed since Barry's return. As he wanted, together with Aurora, They moved into the house where his grandmother used to live. It was a decision made to keep his mother and her boyfriend from living together. "Dad, are we going out tonight?" Harry ran up to him. "Sure, dear." He lifted the kid up and put him on his shoulders. "Will you marry me?" He whispered to his beloved. "Am I definitely Aurora to you, or do you live with me and represent her?" It was a very important question. "What are you saying? Of course you are you. My favorite." He liked to take her in his arms and twill. She was so fragile that he wanted to protect her from everyone. "Okay, I agree." She kissed his cheek where the scar was. Barry was always embarrassed afterward. He thought she was disgusted by it, but she purposely showed him it was okay. "You know I don't like that." He was embarrassed. "It's okay, love." She held up her hands and ruffled Harry's hair. "Mummy," the man shouted. "Love, you're ours." Mother was happy. "Daddy," the boy shouted. "Yep, I'm your real daddy." They agreed that when Harry grows up, they'll be sure to tell him about his real father. In the meantime, let him grow up knowing that his own uncle would temporarily be his father. "Are you ready, love?" He wanted to look into the room, but she wouldn't let him. "Wait, I'll tell you when I'm ready." She put on a white dress. They stood, so beautiful. Finally, Aurora smiled an open smile. She had a ring sparkling on her finger and a trustworthy man by her side. Barry looked out into the hall. His mother and Sam looked as if they had gotten younger when they started living together. Selena went to church and the cemetery that way. She would tell her sons and Harvey how they lived, what was going on in the house. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked Sam, who was usually waiting for her at the gate. "No, if you feel like doing it, I'll never mind." He loved the woman.
Julia was born in the middle of the war. The little girl didn't understand a thing. Her mother hid her every now and then. She could sleep in a dresser drawer, in a trunk, just so no one would touch her. Maria and John lived in a small town where the war as such did not reach. He went to the front, and Mary had to go to the local factory to work. "Oh, girls, how hard," lamented the woman when it was already 12th hour of work. "Yes, it's not easy for us," echoed her friend, wiping sweat from her forehead. Sometimes they didn't even go home after their shift because they were sorry for their feet and shoes. They just settled down on their sweatshirts in a corner and dozed off. "There seems to be a war on, nothing to eat. And you, why are you so thrashed?" asked Maria Betty. "I don't know myself. I'm heavy. I guess I've got some disease," the girl said with a puff of breath. "She's pregnant," Lucy laughed. "No, John has been gone 3 months," she said, thinking about it. "I'm sure you'll have a baby," said Lucy. Her friend knew a lot about these things. She had 3 children herself. "If that's so, it's good, but it's hard. You can't imagine how." Maria got up. She had to go to the bathroom. She waddled outside like a duck. They tried to do everything they had to do. The machine was high, so high that they had to put boxes underneath to reach it. No one spared the girls and women. They had to fulfill the norms. "Ah, girls, it's starting," Maria shouted. They were in a dirty and cold workshop this time too. Now, Lucy was running somewhere. She opened all the doors on the way, but there was nothing and no one there. She did this until she found a table that was more or less clean. "Thank you," was grateful to her girl. "You're welcome. Come back later for coupons for baby food," she told her just as strictly. All went to work further, and Maria needed to go home. But how to get there, she did not know. Lucy came to the rescue again. "You lie here for a while, and we will finish now, and by night we will take you home," she said. The girl knew that the local watchman, old Jack, had a horse, and they would take it from him. "All right," Maria nodded. Betty went to get the coupons. Lucy made arrangements with Jack, and then late in the afternoon, almost at night, they went to see Maria off. She lived in a nice house. Her parents still lived here. They'd gone to the country just before the war, and Maria had never heard from them again. "Oh, bruh." Betty shivered as they entered. There was wood in the yard, but not much. "That's all right. We'll flood it tonight and keep it going," Lucy said. They did everything as it should be done. They heated water to wash first the baby and then the mother. "And where will she sleep?" "With you. You'll run her over, won't you?" "Nothing. I'll think of something." She smilingly looked at her daughter. When the friends left and Maria stayed in the house with her daughter, she took her in her arms and began to sing lullaby songs that her mother used to sing to her. "Everything will be all right," the girl said. She believed that the war would end. Maria looked that the firewood was burning out. She had to throw some more. She was afraid that from the bed the girl might fall, so she pulled out the drawer of the dresser and put her there. From then on, the girl had a sleeping place there. At the factory, they helped to put Julia in a nursery. How hard it was for Maria to part with her favorite little girl. The kindergarten was at the factory. She could visit her occasionally. But how can it be? Because no aunt will not replace the child's own mother, she lamented. "What can you do? It's just the way things are now." Lucy looked at her. So they continued to work. It was hard, but everyone tolerated it. Time passed. 3 years after John left home, he hadn't written a single letter. But lo and behold, Maria saw the mailman at the window. Her heart jumped. She looked at Julia, who was babbling something, thinking that things would soon get better. Maria ran out onto the porch. She could tell by the look on the mailman's face that nothing good was coming. No, she sat down, it was a funeral, or rather a message that her husband was missing. At that time, almost every house had lost a husband, a son, a brother, so fate had reached her. "Maria, let's go to work." Lucy came to her. She saw that her friend was depressed. She had to cheer her up, to do something. The situation was getting better. The factory continued to work. There was food. Maria received coupons for children's food. "Listen, Julia, you have such a smart," said friends, Maria, when they came to visit her. "Yes, she is somehow on her own. The teacher helps," Maria agreed with them. When the radio reported about the victory, there was no limit to the joy. Everyone hugged and kissed, missing only those who never returned from the battlefield. "Don't be sad, Maria. Now the men will be back. We'll find you a father for Julia," Betty told her. Although she had lost no one during the war, and there was no one, she was also suffering and waiting for her love. Cities did not rebuild quickly. Although the war did not come to the town where Maria lived, but still, everything was in a miserable state. The factory blossomed before our eyes. The administrative building began to be repaired. The shops were also being renovated. "Girls, come to us tomorrow. Julia will go to the first grade." Maria called her friends to visit. "Oh, you won't believe it. I'd like to gather my own," said Lucy. "I'll be there," winked Betty at the girl. "Why are you so mysterious?" "I don't understand." "Yesterday at the Gat House met a young man," she laughed, embarrassed. "Really?" And silent as a fish, work stopped for a while. If before, almost all women and girls made blanks for shells and other parts, now they've been transferred to the sewing shop. Of course, many stayed, but most of them were now sewing. "Nothing is clear yet," Betty blushed. "Will you bring to get acquainted?" Maria asked. And not only, the girl looked back so that no one could hear them. "He has a friend," said he would take him with him. "Oh, that's it, Maria, you're married." Lucy laughed loudly. "That's enough." She turned away and went on with her work. She sawed and thought about how she would present the man to Julia, what she would say to her. It was awkward and embarrassing. The next day, mother and daughter walked to school for the first time. Julia was smiling from ear to ear. She was so eager to get here that she talked her mother's ear off. "You're a schoolgirl." The woman sat down in front of her. All children were the same. If you looked from afar, you couldn't tell the difference. But no one cared at that time. They had to study, live, and build their own destiny. In the evening, the guests came. Betty, as promised, was not alone. "Hello, everyone. First, after the girl entered a tall, blonde-haired young man. "Come in." Maria was a hospitable hostess. There were already treats on the table. There was not a lot of things, so she boiled potatoes and meat, which she bought at the market. "And we are not empty-handed," the guest replied. "Oh, why? You didn't have to." Maria began to feel embarrassed. "Meet Harry. This is Harry." Betty pointed at the guy next to her. "And this is Evan." He pulled something out of his pocket wrapped in newspaper and handed it to the girl. "Thank you." She grabbed it and ran. "You're like you've never seen presents before." Her mother laughed at her. Maria realized that Harry was with her friend, which meant Evan had come to see her. It became even more uncomfortable. Everyone settled around the table. Conversations began. "Girls, why don't we go dancing this weekend?" Harry even stood up. "What are you talking about? Where would I go with a baby?" Maria blushed. "What's the big deal? There's live music in the park, a bandstand," Betty said. "Well, we've got to get through the weekend," Maria said. "Come on, Julia, come here," the young man called the girl. Julia came to the table. She stood in her faded dress and looked at it. Evan sat the little girl on his lap. She smiled. "Never has she seen a man in our house," Maria told him. "Well, and now the master will be in the house. Everything will get better," he said loudly and gave the girl a cockerel. She squealed with joy, jumped off his lap, and went back to her toys. "You'll spoil her like that." She wagged her finger at him. "Now she'll expect sweets from you every time," Maria said. Maria looked at him. She liked him, statuesque, handsome. But, as if everything is fast, what people will say, neighbors. "Did anyone ask me?" She was watching Evan from the sidelines. "Why, you're free, I'm free too. There's nothing in the way." He looked at Betty and Harry. "Yeah, and we're in favor of it too." The girl nodded her head. "We'll live, we'll get to know each other, and then we can get married. What about you, Maria?" Evan plucked up his courage and moved closer to her. "Oh, come on," she waved everyone away. The evening went on. It was boring. "How about a small one?" Harry asked quietly. "Where can I get some?" Betty looked at him. "I've got it all with me." He pulled a bottle out of his pocket. "Maria, bring the shots," her friend commanded. "The liquor made me feel good." "Why don't we sing?" Evan suggested it. "Let's do it," Betty encouraged him. At the table, the song dragged on. Julia sat in the corner, licked the cockerel, and plugged her ears. It was unpleasant for her. The talk went on and on. After the pouring, the revelations began. Betty looked at Vazia so much that it was obvious to the naked eye that it was love. They parted late when it was dark outside. "Don't forget about the dance," Evan reminded Maria as they stood at the gate. "I'll forget with you." She was embarrassed in front of him. "I'll be there," he promised and followed the others. The woman returned home. First she cleared the table, then she unmade the bed and lay down. "Mommy, can I come over?" her daughter asked her. Of course, threw back the blanket. Julia climbed under Maria's warm side, snuggled against her. "Tell a story," the girl asked. And her mother began to tell her about a little girl who grew into a flower. So they fell asleep. Maria didn't even have time to think about Evan. In the morning, Julia took her briefcase. Her mother walked her a little and ran to work. She was very surprised when she met Evan on the way. We're late," she told him and didn't even stop. "We won't be late." He caught up with her, and now they were walking side by side. They entered the factory together. The janitor looked at them and smirked into his mustache. There used to be almost only women here, and now a lot of young couples started to form. It was good. "So, how was the matchmaking?" Lucy was interested. "It was all right, wasn't it, Maria?" Betty looked at her. Yes, she kept her mind on her work. "I saw your fiancé today," her friend laughed. "What do you think of him?" Maria stopped work. "He's a good-looking man," Lucy mocked him. "Are you coming to the dance with us this weekend?" Betty came up to her. "Oh, you there solve your amorous affairs, and I do not have time for it," sighed the woman. "All right, Maria, and I will go. The girl went back to work. Julia, I'll leave Julia at your place, shyly, but asked Maria. Of course, what a conversation. After that, everyone was silent and continued sewing. In the evening, Evan was already waiting for her at the gatehouse. She saw him before she even left the building. Are you following me? Maria asked. I just liked you, so I thought I'd see you off. He walked beside her. Come in, I'll give you tea, the landlady called him when they came to her house. And I'll feed you and put you to bed. He joked. It was still early. She was blushing again, but he could not see it because he was walking behind her. Julia was already home. She heard her mother coming in and ran towards her. Hello, Julia. The man picked her up in his arms. Will you be our daddy? She asked him. If your mother doesn't refuse, I will. He glanced at the woman. They sat down at the table. Maria poured tea for everyone, and Evan took out lambs. Help yourselves, he said. It was a family affair, and in the evening, Evan suggested they go for a little walk. Julia, I'll be back soon, her mother promised her. Okay, she nodded obediently. The girl was sitting at the table, scribbling away in a notebook. Let's live together. Evan asked her outside the gate. Let some time pass. People would misunderstand. She didn't want to rush things. Okay, we'll wait, he elbowed her. They walked down the street. Then Evan walked her home, bowed and left. Oh, you're here again. Maria saw the girl lying in her bed. May I? Asked her daughter. Of course, smiled the mother. On the weekend, Maria took out her only dress, put on beads, painted her lips, and went outside. It was a surprise that Evan wasn't there. He'd been here at the gate day and night the last few days. She walked to the park by herself. Music could be heard. Hello, someone touched her shoulder. She turned and saw him, standing there with a bundle in his hands. Scared her, she laughed. This is for you. He handed her the gift while he was standing in line. I was late for you. Thank you. She looked at the package and didn't know whether to unwrap it now or later. I'll look at it at home. Let's go, or we'll miss the whole thing. He took her hand. Bethy and Harry were already there. They were dancing. Evan picked Maria up by the waist, and they went to the dance floor as well. And Harry asked me to marry him, Betty said cheerfully to her friend. Well and good, oh, we'll dance at the wedding, Maria said cheerfully. Didn't he ask you? Betty looked at Evan. Go on, what's the hurry? I need a man in the house, but not at this rate. The girls laughed. What are you two talking about? Harry interrupted their conversation. Evan came over. Not about you, you're dreaming. Betty turned to her boyfriend. Oh, not us? What else is there to talk about? He dragged her off to dance. Surely not about us. The young man watched as his friend's cheeks flushed. Right, about us. She turned around and went dancing too. Evan watched her. He realized how much hardship these weak girls had to go through. But they had gotten through it all. And now they were dancing happily here. A week later, Evan moved in with Maria. He had a house too, but not as big. So it was decided to stay here. We'd have to sign the papers, Maria told him. Everything will be fine, he winked at her. From then on, Maria had a new husband and Julia had a father. He fixed everything in their house. With his own hands, he had made a floorboard, a desk, a nightstand, and shelves. Now the girl had a place where she could do her homework and put her books. Everything used to be on the table in the kitchen. I'm going to grow up and be the most famous, Julia said. She was 10 years old at the time. You'll grow up and we'll see, Evan laughed back. Julia studied well. She absorbed everything like a sponge. When she came home, she would tell her parents what they had learned. She was an agile girl who wanted to know everything. Oh, Julia, you'll learn a lot. Her mother stroked her on the head. She wanted to be an artist. She dreamed of going on stage and singing and dancing. That's what she told her mom and dad about. She and Evan wanted a little one, but it didn't work out. The man was upset about it, but could not do anything. The family started arguing and fighting. One day, he didn't even come home for the night. So it got away. Maria said to him the next day, "I'm not going anywhere." He stood in the doorway. "I have a wife and daughter here." "I guess you didn't remember that yesterday." She was very upset with him. Julia watched the whole thing. She was not a little girl. She understood everything. The girl had finished 8 years of school. She had to decide to think about a career as an artist. Yes, she liked it all, but she wanted something else. Let songs and dances remain as a hobby. "Mom, when I leave, what will you do without me?" she asked the woman. "Oh, you'd think so. You'd think so," she shook her head. "Well, why? It will be for a long time. Will I find a husband there and stay?" She looked flirtatiously at Maria. But try. Her mother wished her only happiness, a big female. The girl was preparing for her exams. She knew that she would succeed, but she was still worried. "Mom, will we make a dress or buy one?" asked her daughter. "Of course, sir. No one will have such a style, only you," said the seamstress with many years of experience. "I knew that you are the best mom in the world," upped her girl. They bought the fabric from which the dress was to be made, and Maria set to work. It turned out really very beautiful and fashionable. "Well, who doubted the mother?" she said when the daughter twirled at the mirror. "No one ever doubted you." She kissed her on the cheek. "That's it. The daughter is ready for adulthood." The woman stood and almost cried. "No need, I'm not dying. I'm just graduating from school," hugged her daughter. It was necessary to have a good sleep. Tomorrow is a very important day for everyone. So Maria fed everyone dinner early, and by 9 o'clock everyone was in bed. "Julia, congratulations on your graduation." The principal handed her the certificate. "Thank you." She was happy and knew exactly what she was going to do next. "Are you sure?" Her father and mother stood over her as she packed her things. Sure, Julia was applying to an institute that was in a big city. "Come on, do not break wood there. Do not bring in the hem, first study, and then everything else," her mother admonished her. "Mom, I'm a big girl, and I understand what is good and bad." Julia did not want to offend her mother, but these admonitions irritated her. The ticket was already bought. She came to the station, sat on the train, waved to her mother, and went to her adult life. There were no problems with enrollment, because the girl had been preparing for it for a very long time. Dormitory was provided, so there were no problems with housing. "Hello, girls." She entered the room where she was going to live for several years. "Are you going to live with us too?" They smiled back. "Yes, if you don't mind." She stopped near the door and looked to see which bed would get her. "My name is Maddie," one of the girls told her, and pointed to a bed where she could put her things. "And I'm Julia." She began to sort through her bags. "Oh, how many delicious things you brought." The girls looked at the jars of different sizes. "Yes, my mom put on the road. She's like that." Julia put everything under the table so that later you can get and eat. The girls were unpacking their things. They wanted the room to be cozy and comfortable. One was hanging curtains, the other was laying mats. "Where do you cook?" Julia looked at Maddie. "In the kitchen," she laughed. The school started. Everything was normal, just like at school. Julia became an activist in the group. She liked everything. She wanted to participate in everything. Her teachers praised and loved her because she did well in her studies and in everything else. "Heels, let's go to the dance," the guys who studied at the same institute said to them. "No dancing, we have fun here." Julia smiled back at them. "Shall we get acquainted?" One of them asked her. "Why should I get to know you?" "I know you are Anthony from the parallel group," she told him. "How do you know me?" He didn't understand. "And how not to know you? At every meeting they talk about you." Julia wagged her finger at him. "Oh, you're the one everyone praises," he remembered. "Why is it that if a person is eager to study and does everything well, he can be insulted for that?" She didn't understand. "Okay, sorry," he tilted his head. "No, you explain it to me." She stood in front of him. Everyone is talking about you. In the dorm you're watching everyone, in the institute you're watching everyone. You can't get away from you, the guy began to explain. So, and nowhere, if everyone did everything right, and I would not interfere anywhere, she answered him. So, you're not going to the dance? He asked for the last time. Yes, I am, she posed. Julia thought that if they say that about her, then she can show that not only at school can behave properly. Let's go, he wouldn't back down. Girls, let's go to the dance, shall we? She looked into her room. Julia, you've never been out, have you? They were surprised. But tonight I will, she said firmly. The whole bunch of them rolled out into the street. There was no need to go far, because the city garden was opposite their dormitory. Shall we dance? Anthony came up to her. I don't dance with people like you. She turned away from him. She wanted him to persuade her. What are you doing? He was still standing next to her. And nothing, you won't insult. She stood proudly with her back to him like that. Fine, stay here by yourself. He went to the guys. Julia stood there for a few more seconds with her back turned, wondering if he would stand his ground or come over again. But Anthony was proud too. Now he was standing there talking to his friends. Julia was so taken with this young man that she couldn't help but think of him. Why had he left then? Why hadn't he insisted she dance with him? She always got her way and people gave into it. This one just turned around and walked away and didn't even look in her direction. The dance was over and the girls left for the dorm. Julia, why are you so sad? Maddie came up to her. Say, do you know Anthony from the parallel group? She asked her. Of course, we went dancing with them recently, smiled Maddie. Say, how can you be like that? Julia couldn't find words. Like what? Her roommate didn't understand. Like what? Like what? Like this? The girl jumped off her bed and left the room. Are you out of your mind? Maddie said after her. And in Julia's mind, there was only one thing. She wanted only one thing now, to get Anthony's attention, and then to tell him what she thought. But how to do it? To approach him herself, pride did not allow, and he would hardly come to her again. It turned out that Julia's whole group was going camping. As long as the days were sunny, they had to get everything done. Julia, are you coming? Maddie ran in, out of breath. Sure, I'm packed. She pointed to her backpack. Now I'll leave something too. The girl was in a hurry. The bus wouldn't wait. They had to get to the woods, and then they'd be on their own. It was not their first hike, so the girls really wanted to get there, because it was so much fun. The guys sang songs around the campfire, the girls cooked. And then everyone enjoyed delicious and hot porridge and soup together. They made it in time, climbed inside the cabin. Almost everyone was already there. What is he doing here? Julia asked her friend. Who? She didn't understand and began to look where Julia was looking. Anthony, she made big eyes. Anthony, you don't need him, the girl said. They invited everyone. He must have volunteered. Okay, why are you so angry? Julia thought it was better to sit down and calm down, so as not to attract attention. They set off, and were there in an hour and a half. Wow, we've come a long way this time, Zoika said. It's okay, it's even more interesting. Julia started to get off the bus. They reached the place where they had to set up camp quickly. They began to do their own things. Is there a river nearby? One of the girls asked. You can probably hear it babbling. Maddie pointed in the direction. Don't go in there, it's a swift current, Anthony shouted. Yeah, like you know everything around here, Julia said under her breath. What are you whispering? Her neighbor asked her. Just talking to myself, she laughed. After everything was ready, the boys scattered, some to see if there were mushrooms or not. Others gathered branches for the fire, and others just admired the beauty of the forest. Shall we go to the river? Julia called her friend. Let's go, but you remember it's dangerous out there. Maddie glared at her. Yeah, very dangerous, she smiled slyly. Don't say that you decided to swim. It's cold outside, and I won't save you. If anything, the girl warned her friend. Do not carp. Julia made her way forward through the bushes. In front of them opened such a beauty that even took the breath away. Soika, look how beautiful it is here. Julia squeezed her eyes shut. Let's go to the water. They began to descend. Of course, Julia wasn't going to swim, and she didn't have a swimsuit with her. But fate is unpredictable. Her foot slipped on a rock, and she went tumbling down. Julia! Echoed across the river, shouted Maddie. She plunged into the water, and the current picked her up and carried her. Help me, she screamed once. Maddie saw Anthony running toward them with great strides over all the obstacles. He was not frightened and dived in. A couple minutes later, he was dragging Julia out of the water. Were you following us? She coughed. No thanks to her, but she's being rude. I told you it was dangerous, but no, let's go anyway. He turned and went upstairs. Oh my God, you're soaking wet. Maddie sat down next to her friend. I'm refreshed, she laughed. She looked back at where the guy had just gone. Why did you do that to him? What did he do to you? Maddie asked her. I don't know, not yet, I repent. But when I do, I get so angry, the girl confessed honestly. They went. Now, the gym teacher came up to them. He was a chaperone on this trip. It will hurt a little. She waited for some kind of click, but when it became incredibly painful, she realized that everything was in place, because afterwards it became immediately easy. In the evening, as everyone expected, there was a bonfire and songs around it, and the next day, it was necessary to pack for the return trip. It's a pity there's so little time, Maddie said. Yes, we didn't even get to enjoy the romance to the fullest, her friend agreed. I think you've had enough of that, she laughed. They loaded into the bus again. After a rich vacation in nature, everyone fell asleep quickly. The girl stood on her floor near the window and thought, what are you thinking about? She heard his voice from behind. She would have recognized him out of 1,000. Anthony, hello. She turned around. I wanted to talk to you, but I didn't know how to approach. Speak. Here I am, standing in front of you, the guy answered her simply. Look, I'm sorry for the antics that pushed you away, she said. It was very hard for her to do it. Forget it. I didn't even pay attention. It's no big deal. He looked around at the girls running down the hall. You know, I wanted to offer you to study together, to make you better in your studies. I didn't know what excuse Julia could find to be with him. Why, we could, Anthony shrugged. He wasn't averse to making friends with Julia himself. We'll meet tomorrow at the library, she said, though she hadn't expected him to agree so quickly. The library, he muttered and walked down the hall. They began to study, and Anthony was getting good at it. He was capable. Why, in class, are you pretending? She couldn't understand why he knew everything here and not in class. Why, you just explain things so well. He looked her in the eye. Why are you looking at me like that? Julia was embarrassed. Friendship. He held out his hand. Good. For some reason, Julia didn't hold a grudge against him at that moment. They began to meet often in that very library. She helped him write term papers and essays. He amused her. They went to the movies, but they were not dating yet. They had already finished their 3rd year of study. They had become friends. They couldn't be separated by water. That day they went to a movie. There was a comedy, and the guy invited the girl. Afterwards, they went out, reminisced, and discussed the moments of the movie. You know, you're beautiful, the guy said to her. What are you talking about? She laughed gleefully. The truth. He walked over to her and pressed her against the wall. Anthony, let go. She started to pull away. I won't let go. I'll hold you like this for the rest of your life. His face was very close. Fool, you're hurting me. She was still trying to pull away. Me too, just here. He pointed to where his heart was. What? She froze and looked at him. Though he kissed her and immediately let her go, thinking he was about to run away. But Julia stood and looked at the young man. What did you just do? She even stomped her foot. I love you. We've been friends for 2 years, and you don't realize it. He didn't turn around. He stood against the wall. I love you, she laughed. Julia, we're two fools. He hugged her. You're the fool for not admitting it sooner. I couldn't. I'm a girl. She rolled her eyes. They had already returned to the dorm as a couple. Maddie, Anthony, and I aren't friends anymore. Julia whispered to her friend at night. What do you mean? You were always together. She even sat up in bed. He confessed today that he loves me. Julia blushed. She could feel it. The room was dark. Well, friend, I congratulate you. Maddie lay back down. I congratulate myself. Closed her eyes and smiled at the girl. After that day, the young people did not part. Anthony spent the whole day in the girl's room. Or they'd go out after couples and kiss. It got to the point where the superintendent called them in. Julia, what's going on? She looked at her sternly. I've always had confidence in you. Nothing. The girl was very embarrassed to be sitting here. Is there love between you two? She pointed at her and Anthony. Yes, nodded Julia. Stop showing it to the whole dormitory. You are adults, apply, get married. I will give you a separate room, she concluded. Why? The young man wanted to say something, but Julia stepped on his foot so painfully that he squeezed his eyes shut. The couple left the office, both silent. Why did you step on my foot so painfully? He asked and wrinkled his nose. What did you want to say to her? The girl was indignant. Not to her, but to you, he clarified. Me? She turned to him. Yes, why don't we really apply? It's only a year away from the end of school, so we'll do everything together. He really wanted to do that. Okay, we just have to go to my parents first, she thought. I agree. Anthony had been to Julia's house before, so it was nothing new to him. Now, on the weekend and let's do it. They went room by room. Maria waited for her daughter always. She missed her so much that everything was falling apart. And we're here to visit you. Anthony and Julia entered the house. Oh my God, my daughter. Her mom hugged her. Where's Dad? She asked. I don't know, he's out again, the woman began to mutter. She seated the guests at the table, poured tea, took out cookies and candy. We didn't come for nothing, Anthony said, smiling. You say, Maria, although she instructed her daughter that first study and then everything else, but she wanted her and Anthony to be together. Anthony proposed to me, Julia blurted out. That's news. Evan appeared in the doorway. What's the big deal? We have nothing left, and they give us a dorm room, the guy said. Everything is fine, but why without me? The man said good-naturedly. He came up, shook the young man's hand, and hugged his daughter. Well, so how are you? Julia looked at her parents. Where are you going to get married? Evan asked. We didn't want any wedding. We'll just go to the registry office and get married. That's all, Anthony said, as if under his breath. No, that wouldn't do. Our family was used to celebrating holidays. Evan slapped the table and went to the stove. All right, then we'll sign and come here, and we'll set the tables here. The young men agreed with him. When they returned to town, they did as they wanted. First they applied, they had to wait for a short time. And when they received the certificate, they immediately took it to the commandant. That's a different story, she said, and gave them the keys to their room. Thank you, Julia smiled. As promised, they went to Maria's parents' house. Anthony didn't have a dad-warm by then. Maria and Evan had set the table so full of hors d'oeuvres. Where did all this come from? Julia didn't understand. A secret. Her mother put her finger to her lips. Everyone Julia had known since she was a child had come. The young people were congratulated, given gifts. They thought they were the happiest couple on the planet. Do you want to do it together or separately? Maria asked them, smiling. Mom, Julia was ashamed to talk about it, even though she was already married. Mom, what? She mocked her. We'll sleep in separate rooms, she agreed. That's fine, and you will lie with me tonight, as then, in childhood, remembered Maria, and tears came to her eyes. Julia came up to her. She loved her mother very much, because she did everything, so that her daughter could be like that, like she is now. In the evening, Evan settled down by the stove, and his mother, as she had done long ago, threw back the blanket and looked at Julia. May I? The girl asked. Go already, the woman smiled. Julia climbed into her mother. She pressed herself against her body. It was so nice to remember how it was. And the story? Julia started to beg, like when she was a child. Okay, listen. And she started the girl's favorite fairy tale about the little flower girl. Mommy, Julia snuggled up to her. I love you so much. And she said, I will leave, I will find. What will you do without me? The woman finished telling the fairy tale and teased her daughter. You see, when everything is near, you do not realize the value of it. But as soon as you are at a distance, you realize what you really lack. You say all the right things, but each person has his own destiny, sighed Maria. You've lost a lot of people in your life. The girl tried to look her in the face. You have no idea how hard it is. It seemed that Mom began to cry. Where are your parents? You never told me about them. Julia asked. When your father John and I lived together before the war, they went to the village. I didn't even say goodbye to them then, and my father said I shouldn't wait for them, because they would be here soon, but they never came back, and I don't know anything more about them. Julia felt her mother crying now. They lay and talked for a long time. Julia realized that there was so much she didn't know about her own mother. She wouldn't tell, and Julia wouldn't ask. And so it was that part of the family's history had been left out in the open. They fell asleep only in the morning, and then the rooster crowed. They had to get up and get ready, and the guests were coming again. Shall we flood the bathhouse? Evan asked. Sure, Anthony agreed. There weren't many people there today, so everyone behaved as if they were at home with their own people. In the evening, everyone was so tired after the bath and the guests that they went to bed. Well, now we are going home. Julia said goodbye to her parents the next morning. Happiness to you, the woman cried. Study went faster. There was so much to do, but there was no time at all. The young people tried to do everything right so that there would be no complaints against them. And when Julia and Anthony received their diplomas, they were very happy about it. Well, my dears, you can no longer live in the dormitory. The commandant came to them. At least until the end of the summer, the girl asked her. All right, she agreed. We had to find something somewhere, but we were on a deadline. Julia, I have good news. Anthony came home in August. Speak quickly, his wife asked him. I was hired to work at the factory. Now we will have a dormitory, he hugged her. The housing issue was solved, but Julia could not find a job. She was offered a job in a small town, but she refused. Now she was also attracted to the place where her husband worked. And nevertheless, after a few months, she smiled with luck. She also joined the ranks of the factory workers. Everything seemed to be going well in her life. Julia, why don't we have children? Anthony asked her. Wait, let's get an apartment, and then we will think about children, she replied. In fact, the girl was afraid. She thought that a child would be born and take away everything from her, her job, her life in the team. No matter how much her husband persuaded her, she did not agree. Then Anthony thought that if the pregnancy came, Julia would never take a break. Time passed. Husband and wife worked. After a few years, they got their long-awaited apartment. Oh, Julia woke up in the morning. What? Anthony jumped up. Now she jumped up and ran somewhere. But when Anthony heard the distinctive sounds, he lay down and relaxed. It was about time. Are you pregnant? He asked his wife when she came back. I don't know. I guess she sat on the bed, pale. Go to the doctor today, the husband insisted. Okay, don't talk so loud. I have a headache, she asked him. Julia excused herself from work and sat in the hallway in front of the doctor's door after lunch. She was almost 30 years old. It seemed time to give birth, but she was afraid. Come in appeared to be the third time the nurse had invited her in, but Julia didn't hear it. She came in, sat down in front of the doctor. Why are you so late? The first time. He looked at her chart. Doctor, do an examination, and that's it, she asked him. Everything was confirmed. Julia was indeed pregnant. This news in the evening pleased her husband very much. Now we will have a real family, and then we will make a second one, he hugged Julia. This would be born, and he is already thinking about the second, she grinned. If you give birth, nothing will happen to you. He almost danced around the apartment. Strangely enough, the pregnancy went very easily. Julia did everything she'd done before. She thought she'd be lying down. When it was necessary to go on maternity leave, did not want to leave anything and no one, she cried crocodile tears. It was like she had a premonition she wasn't coming back here. Anthony continued to work, and Julia was preparing for the most important day of her life. She kept checking her bag to see if she had forgotten anything, reading books about pregnancy and childbirth. She even decided to go to her mom's to ask her how it was going. Julia, come in. Why did you go so far away? Her mother was afraid for her health. Nothing. There's still so much time ahead, she said. No traveling. Stay with us. You'll give birth here. Her mother was worried. Everything will be fine, but I'll go to my husband to give birth. The daughter stood her ground. Mom, tell me, how does it hurt? Julia asked me at dinner tonight. Oh, you know how I gave birth to you. She sat across from me and smiled. I was a baby then. I don't remember much, my daughter admitted. What's there to remember? On the factory table, covered by a curtain, Lucy and Bethy were helping, Maria said. Yes, it must have been hard, Julia sighed. Why are you sighing? Is it bad? Her mother jumped up. No, I'm fine. I'm just worried. She sipped some water and sat back down. So, we're not making anything up. You're staying with us, period. Her mother was adamant. But a couple of days later, Anthony showed up for his wife. He asked a friend, who had a car, to go together to pick up Julia. You see, Mom, how I am loved. Now we are waiting for you to visit. She said goodbye to her parents, and she and her husband drove home. As the time approached, the excitement grew stronger and stronger, and 2 weeks before her due date, Julia was admitted to the hospital. What did the doctor say? Anthony was worried. At home, while she was telling her husband, she realized that she couldn't sit alone. She had all kinds of thoughts in her head. She got so nervous, she passed out. Turns out it was the pressure. That's it. I'm here for the long haul, she smiled. As long as the baby's okay, Anthony said. And Julia stayed in the hospital. She followed all the doctor's orders, mostly IVs and pills. Now, as she lay in the room with several other women who had already had babies, they talked a lot. Did it hurt to give birth? She asked them. It's different for everyone, answered the most experienced one. For some reason, I'm so afraid of this day, Julia said. Don't be afraid of anything. Listen to the midwife and to everything she tells you, the woman said. Yes, I've read about that too, Julia nodded. During the night, a pregnant woman became ill, screaming and squirming on the bed. What's wrong with her? The girl woke up from the screams. It has begun, answered the one she had talked to during the day. We need to call a doctor. Julia got up and went out into the hallway. The nurses came running in at once, taking the woman to the delivery room. God, how much is she screaming? Does it really hurt that much? Julia stood by the door. She couldn't sleep. Imagine that the pelvic bones have to move apart for the baby to come out, her roommate told her. Oh, I can't wait for that day to come, I can't. I think about it every hour, she said. The next day, she saw the same woman who had been sick during the night. She was sitting quietly in the dining room eating breakfast. "Where's your baby?" she asked her. "They took it away. They will bring it soon for feeding," she answered. "And now you are not in pain?" Julia asked her. "It hurts only when everything happens, and now it's over," the woman said calmly. After that, Julia calmed down a little. Now she really saw the situation from the outside and began to set herself up for a positive moment. "You do not think that everyone has this quickly," said her neighbor in the ward. "Why?" The girl didn't understand. "One will be brought in a couple of hours, and the child is already with her, and the other 8 hours of labor, not intimidating, but warmed the woman." A week passed after she was admitted to the hospital. In the evening, Julia's lower abdomen began to pull. She looked at her roommate in horror. "It's starting," she said. Julia didn't wait and went straight to the nurse. She was given an enema and taken to the prenatal ward. Whatever she did that night, there was a pain that words cannot describe. But Julia didn't scream. Yes, she moaned, but she didn't want anyone to hear her. She didn't want to scare anyone, like the laboring woman in her room. In fact, she watched and listened to everything the doctor told her. At one point, it hurt so much that she thought she was going to pass out, and then it went away. "Congratulations, you have a boy," the woman told her. Julia cried. She realized that she had been more afraid of this day than she had actually been. The baby's cries echoed throughout the room, and it couldn't help but make her happy. Already in the morning outside the maternity ward was Anthony. He was just not jumping for joy. First of all, a firstborn, and secondly, a son. He asked his wife to show his son, but on the second floor there was nothing to see but a blanket. "Congratulations and love," he shouted to Julia, and she stood looking at him and smiling. It was happiness for her too. She realized that she had been afraid and thought about it for nothing. Everything had gone just fine. But now she had a lump of happiness in her arms that she had created herself. Julia and Sam were quickly discharged from the hospital. At home, everything was ready. Anthony had done his best. He had bought balloons, inflated them, and now they were lying on the floor in the apartment. He bought a crib, which was also covered with beautiful vapors. In a vase were flowers for his beloved. He purposely did not take them to the maternity hospital so as not to wrinkle them. Not much time passed, and Julia realized that she was bored sitting at home. But since her son was small, she had nothing else to do. She wanted her mother to come over to her house to unwind by talking to her. "Mommy," she opened the door. Evan and Maria were standing on the doorstep. "We came to visit you to see our grandson. We brought some presents," the woman told her. "How I was waiting for you," she hugged the most dear people. "We had been planning to come for a long time, but we thought we would disturb you," Maria confessed. "What are you saying? You will never interfere with us?" Her daughter looked at her sternly. They all went into the room together. The grandparents couldn't get enough of their grandson. They took him in their arms, hummed, and turned him over in different ways. Julia was even afraid at one point that they might drop him. "How long are you staying?" her daughter asked her. "We just got here and you're already asking," Evan laughed. "Come on, I'm just saying." Julia had changed. She's more serious, more responsible. She was like that before, but now she's more feminine. "Julia, if anything goes wrong, you can always count on us," her mother told her before she left. What could be wrong? She wondered. "I can see that you are bored. If you decide to go to work, be sure that you can leave the child with us." She didn't want him to be put in a nursery as young as she had given her daughter. "Okay, thanks, Mom." She kissed her and closed the door behind them. It was like the mother was looking at water. When Sam was 8 months old, Julia was going to go to work. But as it turned out, her position at the factory was downsized. "So, where do I go now?" she asked her boss. "Sit tight, be patient. Things might still get better," she said. "How will it get better? You have to take me," Julia insisted. I told you, there is no position. I can't fire other people. The woman began to talk to her in the same tone of voice. Julia was not that kind of person. She was not going to sit around and wait. She wrote her resignation letter, went back home, and waited for her husband. In her mind, a plan was brewing that would solve everything. "Anthony, I need to talk to you," she told him. "You're so serious," he marveled. When Sam fell asleep, they sat down in the kitchen. Julia poured tea. She seemed hesitant to start a conversation. "What's wrong?" Her husband was getting worried because he didn't know what to expect from this conversation. "I want to leave this town," she said. "What's wrong with this place? If they didn't hire you, then wait, you are still on maternity leave. They will hire you. They have no right to fire you," he said. "I wrote a letter of resignation myself," she admitted to him. "What? And where are you going to go?" He stood up and walked over to her. "Let's go back to my mom's place where I've always lived. I'll get a job at our factory there. I think they'll take you too," she told him. "Okay," he agreed right away. "Really, you agree? And I was afraid to start a conversation with you. I thought you would talk about your position, about your job." She was happy. Not a few months later, Julia and Anthony left for the hometown where the girl was born. "Well, in close quarters, but not in a fence," said the mother when her daughter told her that they came to live with them. The woman was unspeakably glad that now all the children would be here with her. If there was some other little house, she wouldn't mind moving there, as long as they were happy. "Settle down wherever you like. Don't think about us at all," she told her daughter and son-in-law. "No, you don't think. I'll get a job now, and they will give us an apartment," said her daughter. The next day she really went to the factory, and she did not refuse, but she had to work in the foundry. But difficulties never frightened Julia, so she agreed. Her mother was still working, so it was decided to give Sam to the kindergarten. "Oh, how will he be there?" Julia wailed in the evening. She hoped that her mother would sit with him. "Well," agreed the mother, "I'll talk at work. What about my pension?" The very next day, Maria sat at the boss's office and told her how everything had turned out. "Well, what are you, Maria? Did not work a little bit," the woman lamented. "My grandson is dearer to me than all this," she circled the room. "Okay, I won't keep you. I remember only good things." She signed her documents. "Thank you very much." She stood up, bowed and walked away. The woman was released on early retirement, and now she sat with Sam, and Julia and Anthony went to work, as they wanted to, and back to the factory. "I've been offered a pretty good position," the son-in-law told his mother-in-law and wife at the table that evening. "That's to be expected," Julia shrugged. "Now you have to ask for an apartment. You're not a simple laborer, you'll get one." She was sure of what she was saying, so she said so. A year, a second year. Time flew quickly. At first, Anthony was embarrassed to ask his bosses for something, although Julia told him that they were entitled to an apartment. Living with his parents was already very hard. Not because anyone didn't like anyone, it was just cramped. So Anthony went. He talked to the boss, and he told him off for not coming earlier, and they were given a one-room apartment. What an evening! Everyone was happy with this news. And Julia had her own secrets. By now, Julia realized that she was pregnant for the second time. Now she was no longer worried. She was not afraid of anything. There were mom and dad, housing, kindergarten, so there were no bad thoughts. That day, she went to work as usual. Changed her clothes, took her desk. "Julia," a colleague shouted to her. She wanted to ask her something. Yes, she looked back, and at that moment, she put her foot down awkwardly, and Julia started to fall. The woman struggled to hold on, realizing that she might hit the concrete floor. But it didn't help. "She's going to kill herself." The one who had just called out to her ran up to her. Julia was lying on the floor of the shop, in a lot of pain. Sparks were still coming out of her eyes, and her stomach was tearing from the inside. "You're bleeding," someone in the room said. An ambulance was called. Julia was taken away, and already in the hospital, she'd learned that she had lost the baby. She cried and didn't know how to go home. Why had she made such a mistake? Herself, no one to blame for it. Julia didn't understand how this could have happened. Even yesterday, everyone was enjoying life, it was good, and now there is nothing, or rather, no one. Enough, tears will not help the grief, her husband told her. Sam was running around. By now, he was already in kindergarten. Can I go before my mom? The woman raised her tearful eyes. Sure, why do you ask? He hugged her. Anthony was moving up the ladder. Now he was already in a very high position. Why don't you quit your job already if it's so hard for you? Anthony asked his wife. It had been 6 months since the incident, but she still couldn't calm down. No, it distracts me. Julia wasn't interested in anything. The most she paid attention to was her son and his studies. Okay, Anthony shrugged. Now he'd go to work and stay late into the evening. When he came back, his wife would throw tantrums. Does that make it easier for you to get through the hardships? He asked her. What hardships are you talking about? I feel bad. Samoy and I are waiting for you at home, and you were walking around in the middle of nowhere, she shouted. I see. He went to the kitchen. What do you understand? She followed him. Julia, exhale. Calm down, he said in a calm tone so as not to anger her even more. You lost a child too. Don't you feel bad now? She wasn't going to shut up. What am I supposed to do with all this? He didn't know. Somehow her husband was out again. He came very late, all dirty and drunk. Where? She wanted to ask a question and get hysterical again. But when she saw her husband's condition and his head was split open, she calmed down. It was the first time Julia had ever seen him like that. What are you looking at? That's all, he said. Where have you been? She asked in a different tone of voice. Tears streamed from her eyes. She couldn't believe that this decent man she'd known for so long could do such a thing. But Anthony answered her nothing. He took off his coat and went to bed. In the morning, his wife didn't touch him. She tipped it around so Anthony wouldn't say anything. And what are you sneaking around for? He turned to the hallway where his wife was indeed sneaking around. I'm sorry, she walked over to him. What are you apologizing for? He didn't understand. And if you had killed yourself yesterday? She cried. It's okay though. He handed her a sandwich. Yes, but I wouldn't have survived. She hugged her husband. For a while, the family settled down. Sam made his mother happy. He, like her, had done well in school, always helped his grandmother with the vegetable garden. He did everything at home too. Julia saw that he had a fondness for assembling various parts. She bought him a special constructor. The boy could take apart a radio and make a whole new toy out of its parts. Of course, it was not applicable anywhere, but it is also necessary to know how to do it. But when the son went to the 5th grade, the family again began something incomprehensible. Where's Daddy? He asked Julia. I don't know if it was an innocent question, but it made the woman so tense that she couldn't even breathe. He didn't show up until this morning. And what time is it? Standing in the hallway was the wife. I don't know, he hiccuped. Look at you, you hold such a post, and you don't know what you're doing. Today was a day off. Everyone was at home. What am I doing? The man didn't understand. Now he could often stay late with ordinary factory workers just to avoid going home. There it was necessary to listen to the cries of his wife. I'm going to my mom's. Julia began to pack. Good riddance. He did not stop her. Those words came over the woman like a hurricane. She turned around and just stared at him. You'll regret those words. She dropped everything and walked to the kitchen where Sam was having breakfast. Mom, why are you cursing at Dad? He asked her. None of your business, the woman shouted at first and then regretted it. Every day she cried. She didn't know how to bring herself and her feelings in order. You understand, it's not like I'm walking away from you, just sitting with the men, explained Anthony to her calmly in the evening. And what? These men are dearer to me. Again cried the wife. Of course not. He kissed the top of her head. Then why do we have everything like this? She herself did not know the answer to this question. Calm down, darling. Everything will be fine. You just know that. He got up and went to the kitchen to make tea. Julia looked after him. She was going to go see her mom, talk to her. Hi. She walked into the house. Why are you alone? Maria asked her. I want to talk. The daughter sat down on a stool. About what? The mother knew what the daughter would ask her, but she wanted to hear it from her. I think Anthony has someone, she said, and then cried. No, the woman hugged her. How do you know? She looked at her mother. Evan, and I also had such a period. The man has a midlife crisis. Give him a break from you. He will settle down, the woman advised. I can't. Julia continued to cry. You'll see, a year, 2 years will pass, and you'll have everything the same. Maria stepped back and began to go through the closet. A year, 2 years. I can't wait that long, Julia even shouted. Then leave him, Mom shrugged. No, Julia got to her feet. Then don't cry, it won't make anyone feel better, Maria said quietly. Mommy, she hugged the woman. I understand. Calm down, she stroked her head. Julia returned home in a slightly uplifted mood. She went into the kitchen and started cooking. What smells so good? Her husband came in. Here, I've made dinner. Julia's behavior had changed. And indeed, as she changed, Anthony began to change too. Things were starting to settle down in the family. Sam went to school. He was already in high school. One day, his father talked to him about his career choice. I don't know, I'm gonna be a banker, he said. Where did that come from? His father was very surprised. They're all the rage now. Sam wasn't a stupid kid. Well, you have to finish your studies first, and then you'll see. His father was proud that he had such a young man growing up. Do you think he'll make it to the 10th, or will he leave at the 8th? He asked his wife. I don't know, but I'd advise him to make it to the 10th. Julia turned to her husband. We need to talk to him about it, but some other time. He looked back and saw that his son was going somewhere. I'm going for a walk, Sam shouted, and left. Time was running very fast. Julia realized that old age was creeping up, but she tried not to think about it. Her son had already graduated from high school, standing all handsome next to his classmates. And she still remembered the smell of that new certificate, which she was handed at school. All the family was here, as well as close acquaintances. Sam's all grown up, Grandma said, looking at her grandson. Yes, he will soon get married, fly away from the nest, and there is no telling what kind of daughter-in-law he will have, Julia said sadly, looking at the graduates. Sam, as he wanted, entered the financial technical school. He began to study. Everything was good. Nothing boded ill. Hello, everyone. Julia entered her mother's house. No one answered her in return. Where are you all? She went through the rooms. Her mother was lying on the floor looking at her. Ambulance. Urgently, come, the woman is bad. She shouted into the phone. The car came quickly. The grandmother was taken away. She never returned home. Mom, how could it be? The coffin stood in the middle of the room. Don't cry, daughter, her father came to her. Why didn't she tell me earlier that she wasn't feeling well? Julia was crying and couldn't stop. She didn't tell me anything either, even sat down. Everyone gathered to say goodbye to Maria. She was a good woman and hard worker, and she had medals for working on the home front during the war. I didn't save her. Julia sobbed in the cemetery. Everything comes to an end, her husband told her. They had a wake and then drove home, and Julia's depression began to linger again. But now she didn't yell at anyone. She didn't do anything. She just sat and stared at one point. This can't go on, Anthony yelled. He had problems too. The factory had stopped paying wages. There was some confusion. 6 months after her mother's funeral, Maria's neighbors and acquaintances gathered to remember her. "Where's Evan?" Betty asked. "Really, where's Dad?" Julia looked around. She went into the kitchen of the dining room where they were and dialed their home phone number. "Dad, where are you?" she asked when he picked up the phone. A hoarse breathing sounded in response. "I'm coming." She hung up, but there was no way to go. The car that had brought them here had already left. So Julia ran. She prayed to God that she would make it in time. She ran into the house and her father was lying on the chairs in the kitchen. "Daddy," she ran to him. "I called an ambulance," he muttered. "What was it?" The woman didn't understand. She thrashed around the kitchen, not knowing what to grab onto. The paramedics arrived and took Evan to the hospital. For a week, they fought for his life, but nothing could be done. "That's it, I'm an orphan." Julia felt sorry for herself at the cemetery. Anthony did not come this time. He was also a little sick and lay in bed. "How am I supposed to deal with all this?" She came home. "Julia, don't exacerbate the situation. I'm already sick. Give me some pills, please," Anthony asked. Perestroika came. Everything began to change, including the factory where Anthony worked. Julia was lucky. She was already retired. "I can't take it anymore." Anthony came home, his face red. "Are you sick?" Julia was alert. "No, I feel very bad," shouted the man. Julia went to the kitchen to get him some water. "And what are you silent for?" She returned, the glass falling out of her hands. She rushed into the room. And again the ambulance, the hospital. "No, please, not again." She sat by his bedside and held his hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered with just his lips. "No, don't leave me." It had been 8 months since Evan had been gone, and a little over a year since Mom. "Love," he lay under an IV. Anthony was gone 3 days later. Julia walked behind the casket. She didn't cry because the tears just weren't there. She'd already cried them all. "Hold on," someone told her. But there was nothing to hold on to, nothing. She was like a sleepwalker, seemingly awake, but in fact she was so deep inside herself that she didn't realize it. "Mom, what's wrong?" "My son came home from school." "Nothing. Why didn't you come to your father's funeral?" she asked him. "I couldn't. It was practice," he was undressing. "We have a house that needs to be stoked at least once a week, or everything will rot," Julia said. "So stop it," Sam sassed her back. "How do you talk to your mother?" But she didn't even have the emotion to yell. "That's it, go," he waved her off. When Sam left, Julia decided to move into her mother's house. She did. Nothing would happen to the apartment, but the house might. The son called. "Hello," she picked up the phone. "Mom, I need money," he told her. "How much?" She waited. "Not much." He was kind of shy. "And how will I send it to you?" she asked. "If you give it to me, I'll come." The guy was happy. He was at her place in a couple hours. "Why are you here?" He couldn't find her at home and decided to look for her at her grandmother's. "I moved," she said. "Okay, give me the money and I'm off." He held out his hand. "How much?" the woman asked again. "As much as there is." He himself did not know how much he might need this time. "No, I can't give you that much." Julia shook her head. She realized he wasn't in for a serious case. The woman took a few bills and held them out to Sam. "It's not enough." He wrinkled his nose. "I could add as much more," she returned, and did the same. "Okay." So that left the disgruntled son. Sam had long been addicted to slot machines. Now there just wasn't an hour that went by that he didn't play, and he needed money to do it. The guy was running various schemes, but he still didn't have enough. "Wait," his mother stopped him. "Have you been drinking?" "Drunk or not drunk? What do you care?" He ripped his arm out and walked out of the house. She couldn't believe she'd lost him. What had happened to him? He'd been such a good guy before all this happened. But she was in for an even bigger blow. She couldn't even think that such a thing could happen in her life. Not even a week after she gave her son the money, he showed up again. This time it was obvious to the naked eye that he had been drinking somewhere. "Mother, give me the money," he shouted. "Why aren't you at school?" She came out and shouted at him. "I haven't studied for a long time," he laughed. "Well, undress and go to bed." She wanted to pull off his jacket, but the guy pushed the woman away so hard that she flew back to the stove and bumped her head. It was the first time anyone had ever touched her. Julia regained consciousness. She didn't understand anything. She was dizzy. She got up from the floor, drank some water, looked into the room. Sam was lying on the couch sleeping in his clothes. She decided not to touch him yet, but come tomorrow, he would have to listen to her. Julia touched the back of her head. Everything hurt there. She went into the room and lay down too, having taken some pills beforehand. "Why don't we have anything to eat in the house?" Sam spoke very impertinently. "First of all, good morning." Julia opened her eyes. "Yeah," he was rummaging through the lockers. "What are you looking for?" Julia asked, thinking it was money. "You got anything to drink?" He turned to her. "Sam, son, what happened to you?" She went over to him. "Don't touch me." He pulled her hands away like it wasn't her son at all. "What's going on?" She put her hand over her mouth and cried. "Give me a drink." He stood over her. "Over there," she pointed her finger at the cellar. "Oh wow," Sam went down there. Even liked to experiment. He brewed moonshine with everything he could get his hands on, and also made various liquors and tinctures. So Julia knew there was something in the cellar. "Get out." His mother called him back when almost an hour of time had passed. No one answered her. She peeked in. The boy was just sleeping there already, apparently having had too much to drink. Julia gathered herself and went outside. She didn't understand at all what was going on in her life and more. When she came back, she saw that there were a lot of splinters on the floor. She looked into the cellar. There was no one there and a good part of the alcohol too. And the shards must have taken the appetizer too. Julia sat down on a chair and cried. It seemed to her that tears were the norm of her life, though they were no longer. The woman knew that there was a club for veterans or pensioners in the local DK. She decided that she would go there because she was bored alone. So she did. There were many acquaintances there, and they all did various things together. They sang, sewed, knitted, painted. They even had art exhibits. "You know, Julia, we have one more job to do," Caroline once told her. "Yes, what was it?" She wanted to know. "We take care of stray dogs," her friend told her. "I love dogs," the woman smiled. "Then tomorrow take some treats for him, and we'll go there," Carolina asked her. "I will?" Julia's mood even lifted. The dogs were adorable. There were many of them, all in the same territory. One day, a boss offered us his garden, and we didn't refuse. We made a fence with our own hands. We have men, she showed her class. "What a wonderful idea," she smiled. "Come on, don't be afraid." Caroline led her by the hand. "I'm not afraid." Julia stepped over the threshold. "This is Barbos, this is Sharik, and this is Mukhtar." The woman began to list the names of the dogs. Julia saw one that was sitting apart from everyone. She felt so sorry for her that she went straight to her. "Why are you sitting here alone, little one?" She sat down beside the dog. "She is deaf," Caroline told her. "I see. Why is she sitting here so quietly?" The woman stroked and stroked her. The dog felt the affection and began to pet the woman. "Do you want to take her home?" suggested her friend. "Oh, I'm not ready for such feats yet." Julia smiled modestly. They were returning home, and it was calm in their hearts. Julia did not expect anything good from this life. "Ma, hi." Just she opened the gate and heard her son's voice. It had been a whole year since she'd last seen him. Scared her, she jumped up. "What's so scary?" He smiled. Julia noticed his mouth was missing a couple teeth. "Sam, how long do we have to wait here?" A woman's voice came from behind the house. "A woman?" Julia couldn't even tell how old she was. She looked like she had a lot of age on her face. "Hello," Julia said sternly. "Oh, hello." Her son's friend was hugging. "Sam, keep your companion quiet." The woman stepped back. "And we're coming to live with you," he grumbled. "Come on in." She opened the door. Everyone went inside. "Why are you so unfriendly?" The son looked at his mother's back. "Explain to me, who is that?" She pointed her finger at the woman. "My future wife," he said. "I was wondering, wife, how old are you?" Julia asked. 40, she replied almost proudly. "And him?" The mother pointed at her son. "That's for you to know," she laughed. "Selena, stop it," Sam stopped her. "And what? You're going to sit here and drink, and I'm going to hump you?" Julia asked both of them. "What's the big deal? Sam's changed a lot since then." "Nothing, that's not gonna happen," the woman shouted. "And we're not asking you if it will or not." He got up and walked towards the cellar. "Stop," she asked her son. "And if you don't?" He didn't turn around and kept walking. "Then I'll stop you myself," she motioned to him. "Try it," he laughed. Julia stopped. She remembered the last time he'd pushed her away. She didn't want to take any more chances. Times have been hard in the country, and here, it was like everything was fine, except for that companion her son had brought, Celine. Why are the dishes dirty again? Julia came back from the cultural center and told Selena. "Take it and wash it." She sat at the table and didn't even look at her. "How dare you talk to me like that?" The woman was indignant. "Stop yelling at my fiancé." Sam entered the kitchen. "Fiancé," Julia smirked. She put up with all the antics of that girl and her son. They've been living with her for 2 years, and it was only getting worse. "If you don't get out of here now, I'm going to have to take action," Julia threatened Selena. "That can only be decided by Sam," the latter said. "Let's see who decides." Julia couldn't take it anymore. She spent most of her time with her acquaintances at the club or with her dogs. She was doing everything she could to get Selena out of the house. At first, Sam wouldn't give up, defended her, but then she started to grow cold to Selena, and at some point, she just got up and walked away, apparently sick of it. "Did you get it?" Sam took a swing at his mom. "Son," she put her hands forward, covering her face. But Sam couldn't see or understand anything. The woman reached for the phone. She called an ambulance. They arrived and were horrified at the sight of the woman, but she didn't report her son. For a whole month, she lay in the hospital. Friends visited her, most often Caroline. "How did it happen?" her friend asked her. "I don't know. I've been living like this for a long time. I didn't want to make a mess. But you see how it turned out," cried Julia. "Yes, you have a story." The woman shook her head. Julia was afraid to go home. She realized that nothing would change. "Son," she came home from the hospital. "Oh, I'm awake." He was in the kitchen. "Look at you. What do you look like now? You're only 30 years old. And what have you accomplished in life?" She was talking to him, and everything was shaking inside. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Listen, we have an apartment in the city. Maybe you move there," asked his mother. "What? You want to get rid of me?" He stood over her. "No, of course not. What are you talking about?" She waved her hands. "That's all. I have other plans for the apartment." He sat back down. Julia stopped saying anything to him. She could see her son going downhill, but there was nothing she could do about it. He continued to drink and gamble. Of course, he took money for everything from his mother. She tolerated and kept quiet because there was nothing she could do. Julia started to get a lot of pain, mostly in her head. She felt all kinds of pressure. She could feel the weather, and she felt sick all the time. "Julia, do you want to go to the dogs?" Caroline came to see her. "Hello, who are you?" she told her. "What are you?" "Friend, it's me, Carolina," surprised the guest. "Ah, Carolina." They were standing in the yard of Julie's house. "Didn't you recognize me?" the woman asked. No, of course I recognized her. Julia waved her off. She really did realize now who was in front of her. Often Julia would go out to get groceries at the store and then not realize what city she was in or where she was. Then she would get to a bus stop and sit there until someone she knew found her. Her son didn't care about any of this. He acted like a pig, telling everyone that he was moving his mother back to the apartment where he would feel better with her. Caroline defended Julia. She's here with her friends and her dogs, she told Sam. Your dogs aren't going anywhere. He wouldn't let her in the house. They moved. There were few acquaintances in that neighborhood. Julia, when she was mentally alert, realized she had some kind of illness. She decided to see a doctor. But when she left the house and walked some meters, she realized that she was lost again. She sat down on a bench and some vagrant girl came to her. Mother, give her some money for bread, she asked her. It's all at home. I wish I knew where I live. She was sitting in her own yard, but she didn't realize it. Oh, you're not feeling well at all. The woman got up and walked away from her. Sam stood at the window. He saw it all. This time he felt sorry for his mom, went out into the yard and took her home. So she also resisted that she would not go anywhere with a stranger. Hello. He came with his mother to the hospital. She needs to be checked out. Well, the doctor saw the condition of the young man, looked at him judgmentally, but taking care of his mother gave him a chance to rehabilitate himself. Julia had to go to the hospital. Sam drove her there. It's not gonna get better. It's only gonna get worse, the doctor told him. Right. So Sam took his mother home after she was discharged. Sometimes Caroline came to visit, and she tried to convince Sam to bring her back to her parents' house. But he wouldn't budge. And what did he want with the apartment? Julia managed to get away while her son was away, wherever she went. Once she spent a couple nights with vagrants, but by some miracle, they always brought her back, or she remembered where she lived. Sam, I want to go home, Julia said one morning. No house, lie here, he told her gruffly. The woman waited for him to leave, got ready, and went herself. While she was in her mind, wrote everything down on a piece of paper, where she wanted to go and where she was from. And it worked. She got there. Julia, how can you be alone? Caroline walked towards her. Who are you? The woman looked at her. What did he do to you? He didn't spare your own mother. Carolina began to cry. She took Julia under her arm, and so they went to the dogs, and then returned to the club. Julia sang songs with everyone together. It was so strange. She didn't recognize anyone, but she remembered the songs. Friends and acquaintances wondered. And then she sat in the house for a long time, reviewing the album, but she didn't recognize many people there. Sam thought she'd gone somewhere else again. He didn't think about it at first, but when his mother was gone for almost a week, he got worried. Sam, it's Caroline, the woman called him. I didn't do anything. He immediately started to justify himself. I know, that's why I'm calling. Your mom is here in her house, she informed him and hung up. It was impossible to live like this. Sam could not without his mother's money. He went to her. The son realized that if his mother died, he would need something to bury her with. He was in debt, but he couldn't do anything while she was alive. Julia became ill at night. He called an ambulance. The doctors took a long time to arrive, but arrived, and the woman was back in the hospital. The attacks were frequent. Sometimes it got to the point where it was every 2 months. Your mom's not well, the neighbors told him. Well, leave her alone. I'll take her to the city, to the hospital, so that everyone would leave her alone. They moved back to the city. By now, Julia didn't remember or recognize anything at all. Sam could have taken her outside and left, and come back hours later, and she'd still be sitting there on the bench. Let's go. He took her under his arm. How's Julia's health? Caroline called and asked. You know she's gone again. Isn't she at your place? I've been looking for her, Sam said cheekily, his mother sitting in the kitchen. What are you talking about? You should report her, the woman said. The man even thought of putting her in a nursing home, but then he'd lose everything. Then he had an idea. He spent a year answering her friends and everyone who called that her mother was out somewhere and he could not find her. Then he'd call back and say he'd found her. Everyone was happy that he cared about his son, even though he was such a son. Caroline was the only one who knew the truth, that all he wanted from his mother was money. He'd been hatching this plan for years. His mother had fallen ill, but she received her pension every month. Sam realized she didn't have much time left, so he had no better idea than to take her somewhere himself. "Come on, let's go," he said, but she just looked at him and didn't say anything. He took her out of the driveway. He knew that the local dump is inhabited by vagrants and took my mom there. There was no one there, but the stuff was still there, which meant someone would still come back. He put mommy there, turned around and walked away. Didn't even look back once. "Oh, we got company. 2 men and a woman are back. Where'd she come from?" One of them asked. He was shaking so much he was going in different directions. "I don't know. She must have come by herself. You see her sitting there, dazed," said the woman. They searched Julia's pockets and found some bills and coins. "Come on, Grandma, let's go." The tramp lifted her up. They went to the heating main, where they spent the night. "Why did you take it with you?" Her companion asked her. "What if someone loses it and we say we found it in a garbage dump?" "Who are you?" Julia asked them. "Look, she can also talk," laughed the woman. "Caroline?" Grandma looked at her questioningly. "Do you want me to be Carolina?" She pulled some food out of the bags. "Should we take her to the hospital?" The one who was shaking asked. "Yeah, we'll be admitted there." The woman shook her head. "Where to then?" They were all drunk, so their heads weren't working very well. Caroline called Sam, but he didn't answer, disappeared altogether, in an unknown direction. She went to his apartment, went inside, but she couldn't find anyone. The woman was very worried about her friend. "Look, she's not well." One of the vagrants pointed his finger at Julia, but the woman couldn't answer him. He called an ambulance. They came and took the body away. When they took her to the morgue, the doctor who admitted her recognized her. "I got a call about this woman. I think her name is Julia," he said. "She didn't have any documents on her," the young man said. "I'll be right back." The man went up to the office. He was looking for a piece of paper with Carolina's phone number written on it, and he found it. "Carolina, hello." He began the conversation. "Good evening," she was excited. "Julia, I think you were looking for her," he asked. "Yes. Has something come to light?" The woman became even more agitated. "Come," the doctor said. She didn't think for a minute, dropped everything and went where she was invited. The woman ran into the lobby of the hospital, and the doctor who had called her the other day was waiting for her. "Hello, it's me. I called you." She ran up to him and couldn't catch her breath. "Yes, I already realized that from the look of you," he told her and pointed to the exit. They walked into the morgue building. Caroline immediately realized everything. She saw her friend's body, her eyes immediately stinging with tears. Carolina turned away. She didn't want to see her like that. "Tell me, where did you find her?" she asked. "I've been both at home and in the apartment." She was nowhere to be found. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he looked at her sadly. "Tell me, I can believe everything already." Caroline knew Sam could do as he saw fit. "She was found by a man near the garbage cans. She was already dead," the doctor muttered and lowered his eyes to the ground. "Oh my God." The woman clutched her head. "I knew it would come to this." "Do you know something?" "We should report it then," he told her. "No, it's all useless." She shook her head in the negative. "Because she assumed who did it and why." "Why?" the doctor asked and fell silent. He seemed to realize what was the reason for this whole circus. Yes, I see you guessed it. Julia hadn't been feeling well lately. She didn't understand anything and didn't know where she was, nor did she recognize anyone. So she would leave the house and just get lost in the street. Well, if acquaintances saw her, they would bring her back home. But if none of them were around, she stayed on the street, the woman said and said. She had a son, didn't she? The doctor clarified. Yes, she did. But who was he, did you see? The woman asked dismissively. Of course I saw. He was the one who'd brought his mother to me, the man told her. Of course, I can't prove anything, but I think he's the one who brought her to this state. She put her whole life into him, and he just threw her in the trash, Caroline said. Will you take care of her body? The doctor asked. Of course, as soon as you tell me, I'll come and get her. I live where her parents used to live. I'll bury her with them. At least now she will be at ease near her relatives. She cried and could not calm down. There is no need to be upset. Go home, rest, and we will notify you. He even slightly embraced her. The woman went home. She wanted so much to go to the House of Culture, where they all gathered together. But it was already late today, so she decided to postpone everything for tomorrow. The next day, Caroline told everyone what had happened. Everyone was shocked. Preparations began for Julia's dignified burial. She was brought in, not brought into the house. The farewell was held in the House of Culture. Now wait, said a friend, as if she remembered something. While the body was still inside the building, she tried to make it. The woman got out of there and ran to Julia's house. She wanted to take the icon she had been walking around with lately and put it with her. Caroline ran up to the gate, pushed it open, but it wouldn't budge. She didn't realize anything. The house was locked from the inside. The woman started pounding on the window, but no one opened it. Sam, open up or I'll break the windows, she shouted. At that moment, a man's shaggy head appeared in the window, nodding at her, saying, What do you want? Open up, I said. She wasn't going to back down. There was a creak of the bolt, and the door opened. At the same moment, Caroline attacked Sam. Look what you did to your mother. You threw her in the dumpster, and there she died. What is she, a dog? Dogs are better than dogs. The woman started yelling. Why are you snapping at me? I don't know where she went. I couldn't find her. He started to justify himself. Where were you looking for her? Where were you? I was looking for you. I had to. I found her. But well, my mother still has the apartment and the house. It should all go to me. I need to do the documents. He said. It was clear that last night he had not just spent the evening. What a scoundrel you are. You killed your mother just for the inheritance, she told him with indignation. What do you know? He wanted to insult her, but Caroline was not his mother. She could answer him. The woman packed up and they drove off. Hello. The woman entered the office. I'm here to bring a numbskull who wants to inherit from his mother. Everyone in this town knew the young man because he was the only one here. Yes, Caroline. Come in, he answered her. The woman was not surprised at all because she used to work at the school. Many people knew her. They sat down on chairs on opposite sides of the table. The young man leafed through some papers, then smiled and took out a folder with Julia's name written on it. Are you ready to hear the will? The notary said, and looked at Sam. What will? He couldn't understand. The ordinary one your mother left, the notary told him. My mother left a will. Sam couldn't believe it. She was so pious. She wouldn't do that. Well, that's what you think. But I had her years ago, and all the papers are intact, the lawyer showed him. The woman had warned him then that there might be a case like this. Sam's eyes went wide. What kind of will was there to talk about? His mother hadn't been herself for so many years. He'd kept her with him on purpose, so she couldn't go out, sign or write anything. And here it was, when she had time, and where he let it slip out of his sight. So, the young man began to read out. Julia had bequeathed her apartment in the city to a dog shelter. They can sell it and use the money to make things even better for the dogs. And here's the house. She's giving to the Veterans Club so they can set up a base where everyone can meet. That can't be right. Caroline clutched her head and smiled. She looked angrily at Sam. And what? There's not a word about me in there. How did you all hear? No. He turned the paper to the man. Fuck you. It's all your fault. He flicked the papers that were lying on the table. Then he kicked the chair where no one was sitting. I don't need to smash the furniture here, the man behind the desk told him. Fuck you. The man couldn't catch his breath. And don't be so nervous, the notary told him. Fuck off. I'll burn this house down so no one else can have it. Sam shouted one last time. He won't burn it down, the woman reassured the lawyer. She sat coldly and smiled as if she knew Julia had planned it that way. Were you aware of the will? The young man asked her. He was sure that she had warned her friend. Of course not, she stared at him. She herself was stunned by everything she had just heard. Then your friend found me. I was just starting out. She tearfully begged me to let her write all this. I wondered why she wanted it done so quickly. And Julia told me that her son wasn't what she'd raised him to be. He started drinking, gambling, taking all her money, yelling at her and attacking her. She couldn't tolerate such an attitude towards herself, so she couldn't stand it and wanted to find justice. And after the hospital, things took a bad turn. Julia left a letter for you here. He held out an envelope that was yellowed from time, but looked so familiar. Caroline signed the necessary documents, stood up, thanked the notary, and left the office. She clutched the precious envelope tightly to her chest. The woman hurried home to read what her friend had left her. No sooner had she entered than she sat down in a chair and began to unseal the letter. Hello, dear Caroline. I don't know if I'm still alive or not, but if you took this letter to the notary, in all likelihood you're not anymore. Now, you and I may not know each other very well, but I'm sure we'll continue to talk. I just cherish it so much. I want to tell you that I'm giving all of my possessions to you. I won't need it when I die. I'm not taking it with me to the next world, and I don't want to leave it to Sam. He used to be such a good boy. Everybody used to praise him. But after his father died, he turned into the devil. I'm scared of him, and the only place I can get my mind off him is at the club with the dogs. So don't hold a grudge. Use it and remember me, your Julia. The woman sat reading and crying. What I'm going to tell you now, you won't believe me. She gathered everyone in the club again. Don't languish, it was interesting people. Julia left us a whole inheritance, and she told what and how it happened today at the notary's office. That's what he should do, one of them said. He'd drink it all away, and we'd use it. Others echoed him. We didn't wait for anything. The apartment, as Julia wanted, was sold. With the money that she received for it, bought building materials, and the work began. Finally, the dogs will be warm in the winter, Caroline said. Yes, they are freezing, confirmed the man who had been looking at her for a long time. What are we going to do with the house? A woman who had recently joined the coalition came up. What Julia wanted, we'll set up our headquarters there. Now we'll have a place to gather to sing songs and do everything else, Caroline chirped cheerfully. It was done that way. Now at the dog shelter, in the hall hangs a picture of Julia as the main sponsor of this project. There are also many of her belongings and photos in the house, so that no one forgets her.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.